On the agenda today, we have items of interest from commissioners, followed by the director's report. Then consent agenda, which has consideration of the minutes from June 26th and July 10th meetings. And that will be followed by a work session on the residential infill project. Although I believe, aren't we going to try to have a discussion about Southwest Corridor letters between the consent agenda and residential infill? Yes, I'm getting nods. Or items of interest. Okay, we can cover it there. Perfect. Just want to make sure we don't forget. Okay, items of interest. Anybody want to talk about the Southwest Corridor project?
No, I'll just remind people we're doing this Friday, even though it's going to be 94 or something like that. We're the 15th annual Policymakers Ride. That is looking at how we close the gaps in the 40-mile loop and how we get safer bicycling on Marine Drive in particular. And right now we have about 200 people coming on the ride, depending on how many people freak out over the temperatures. So if anybody didn't get to register, especially on the commission, we can get you in at the last minute. We start at 7 a.m. Friday morning at Blue Lake Park, right out to Multnomah County Drainage District, looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly. What do we need by way of investments to make it both safer and more connected?
I have a question. Is it a loop, and how many miles is it really?
34 in this instance, out and back.
Great.
With kegs of beer at the end.
It's a great event, so thanks for letting us know. I didn't get my invite this year,
Neither did
so
I.
we're going to have to talk.
Ooh. Uh-oh. I can recommend.
But I'm glad to know now. Okay, anybody else?
Well, I'll raise the issue of the letters if we need to. So,
Perfect.
We have had a subcommittee working on letters for both the housing strategy and the DIS for Southwest Corridor, including myself, Andres, and Ben. Met several times, and we have a couple of drafts. I don't know if we have those to review in front of us or how we want to tackle that, but I'll attempt to summarize, and Andre, you can correct me if I miss anything here. On the housing letter, I think we're really stressing the importance of advancing a housing strategy in advance of the final approval of the project, and in particular challenging City Council to capitalize some portions of that strategy very early so that strategic land acquisition can be done before or as the project begins.
And I would say part of that emphasis is that we're emphasizing to meet the stretch goal, not the middle line, but the stretch goal for the housing unit, and for council to do everything, not do parts or pick the things they like, but to do everything as part of the housing strategy.
Yeah, I think we went so far as to say if we're not going to really fund the housing strategy, maybe we shouldn't do the transit project, which got TriMet a little nervous in the room, but I think it's an important thought to put forward. On the DIS letter...
Can I just interrupt there?
Sure.
And that was one of the points I want to make sure, since this letter is coming from the full commission, first of all, if you haven't had a chance to read it, I'd like to encourage you to. I think we have about a week to really kind of maybe clean up some things. So I'd like to kind of have a discussion after this to make sure you're comfortable with the points. And that's one of them I want to make sure everyone's comfortable with. So why maybe
Go on to the DIS letter, or you want to finish that first?
So I guess why don't we just go ahead and talk about that one, and then we'll go on to the DEIS. Are there any concerns with that? Does somebody need to hear the exact language that we're talking about? You all, no? All good? All comfortable?
Could you just repeat it? Because it's...
Sure. So the key concepts are that we are encouraging council to implement the entire housing strategy for the corridor, and in particular challenging them to capitalize very early a couple of the programs that would be involved in strategic land acquisitions before as the project starts, and to a degree telling council that if you're not going to execute on the housing strategy, you should consider whether you should support the transit project or not.
I was not part of the committee. I just read the letter this morning. I thought it was an awesome letter. So I give it a thumbs up.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Are we no concerns expressed? If so, then we'll go ahead and finalize the letter and pass it along.
Okay.
Okay.
And the DIS letter comes right back to housing because
And transportation.
right. So trying to create that linkage between the transportation project and the housing, and in particular, really drilling in on the displacement risk and focusing somewhat on the methodology where the DEIS sort of tries to get away with only talking about the direct displacement impacts, but we know there are huge indirect displacement impacts, and we're sort of encouraging them to own up to that as part of the methodology, even though probably the federal requirements don't absolutely make them go there, but we're suggesting that they should. We also talk about the choice of when to stay in Barber versus leaving Barber, and the temptation to leave Barber is to avoid fixing some expensive infrastructure. So there are a couple of viaducts in the woods portion of Barber, and there's a bridge at the West Portland Town Center that probably ultimately need replacement. And since part of this project is jurisdictional transfer of Barber when it's over to Portland, we feel like it would be good to have the street in good condition when it's turned over to us, rather than leave us three problems that they decided to defer. And their rationale is they have to hit certain cost effectiveness measures for the FTA to get funded, and if they take on the expense of fixing these problems, that may make it harder for them to hit that. But it seemed to us a little penny wise, pound foolish, and that we really ought to do this right, including there are ways to bring money that's not in the project to solve some of these along the way. We also identified some opportunities to improve the active transportation network, particularly the bicycle network, with the thought that if you build a better bike shed, you create the opportunity for more riders to get to the transit project, and we had talked about that when TriMet was here. We also support the Ross Island Bridgehead project, which is something we only lightly discussed, so I think I want to check with the commission whether we want to go on record with that, because we didn't dive very deep into it. Staff talked to us about it, but I don't know how much we discussed it. So, Andre, what am I missing in that description?
Nothing. I would say, just characterizing it, I would say the linkage between the housing strategy and the DEIS, we made that linkage in there, saying the DEIS letter references the housing strategy letter, and the fact that the housing strategy identifies the disparities, but the DEIS doesn't, and there should be that linkage, and encourages the Federal Transit Authority to look at that. And the other general point is that we're also calling out to actively use the TSP, which we as a body put forward as in developing that corridor. And to the points that Chris made, tend to not follow the TSP from our viewpoint. So really using active transportation in that sense is encouraged. And so the bridgeheads and, as he said, Barber Boulevard and some of those things encourage the use of the TSP versus an encouragement of non-auto related activities.
So are there any questions for the subcommittee members on that?
Well, I just have a comment. It seems that you're taking displacement very seriously, and I applaud that, and I'm very much in support of that. However, I'm thinking about the vote that we had the last time, where we voted in terms of the A overlay, and we didn't take displacement. So I'm just wondering, I'd like to hear more from the commission on why you went in that direction here, but then in an opposite direction at another time. And I really care about that vote, and so maybe I'm not supposed to keep bringing it up because we've already voted on it. But I would like to know more about why people voted the way they did.
Go ahead, Mike.
As I said when I voted, I was impressed with the number of housing advocates that felt strongly that we were providing opportunity to folks in that geographic area, and that's what persuaded me.
And I can just quickly say I wasn't convinced that it was going to cause displacement, and so therefore, I felt in some cases it may cause more displacement by not including the A overlay to go on it. So I would counter it to say I am supportive of policies that try to mitigate it. I just didn't think the particular A overlay discussion was causing displacement. So I guess I was persuaded by the testimony.
Anybody else have any other reason why they went in that direction?
Kat and Mike's explanations cover my thoughts as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll add that I think both that I was weighing the opportunities created for new housing, some of which will at least be in the workforce housing range, against the displacement risk, and recognizing also that for those areas to mitigate displacement, we probably need different tools. That denying that opportunity is probably not going to have a significant impact in displacement that may happen anyway, and that we need to be encouraging council to use other tools in those areas. And I hope that'll be part of our letter ultimately by the time we end this process. But I didn't really feel like denying the opportunity of the overlay to those areas was going to be a net benefit to those areas.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your talking to me about it.
Your mic, please.
Sorry.
Okay.
Turned itself off. I appreciate your talking to me about it. And I still don't quite agree, because I think that it would be easier to add in the A overlay after getting those programs than the other way around.
So I did have a question on what I do want to circle back on the Ross Island Bridgehead, I guess, first, because like Chris said, we didn't discuss that in a lot of detail. Is there anybody who has any concerns with adding that to the letter? Mike?
Well, I was going to bring it up. I mean, to me, to my understanding, actually having lived in the neighborhood for a brief period of time, it's a huge issue for that neighborhood in terms of improving connectivity and just improving conditions in the neighborhood. I don't know if that was part of the thinking or not, or whether it was strictly related to the transportation infrastructure.
So I think it has been a long-standing project in the TSP in different forms to eventually deal with that. I think staff also made the point that reconfiguring that, finally dealing with that gives us more options for the light rail station design placement that will result in a better project.
Any other comments? Ben?
I do want to reiterate that I think it's a very important project. I think historically the Markham Hill, Lair Hill neighborhood's been divided in several different ways. First NATO, I-5, and I think we owe it to that neighborhood to do what we can to stitch it back together and repair some of that damage. And I think this is a great opportunity to do that.
Great. Any other comments on that? If not, then I see leaving that in the letter. I did have a question on the comment regarding large commuter park and ride lots, and perhaps I don't remember having this conversation, and I would like to have more understanding of what the concern is there.
So I think I would characterize it as if you have land available near the stations, the highest and best use is housing, not parking.
So here, and again, not understanding the lay of the land and where we're talking about putting those, but I also see that you could have high-density housing, mixed use going on, and having a parking garage that perhaps is designed nicely and supports a vibrant street life, can be wrapped, actually encourages and supports that development. So I guess that's what I was struggling with trying to understand, and I don't understand the plan enough to know if that's possible.
So I might invite Eric, who understands the plan better than I do, to comment on that.
I mean, so in just a little bit, I'll quickly frame it. Imagine you're driving in to go to a park and ride, or you're driving home and you want to stop at the store, so you support the local grocery store, or you kind of name it. It just seems to me like it could help support things.
In the abstract, it wasn't an argument against the park and rides. It was more about the site-specific nature of that particular West Portland Town Center. At the crossroads where the transit center is in the middle of the West Portland Town Center, which is intended on our land use plan to be a dense, walkable, urban place. And the range of options that have been considered in the transit project ranged from using that site primarily for parking to also considerations for a mix of housing and parking. So parking would probably be part of it, but it's a question of how much, and there's been land use concern about using that key site in the middle of the town center for parking. It has also created some traffic congestion issues in the pedestrian area there. So it's more about the idea of putting a large commuter parking lot in the middle of a dense town center versus the idea of a park and ride
near it. Okay. So is there something that we could do to just adjust to maybe state that particular site's it, but
I think that's
a park
what the
and
letter
ride that's kind of I didn't read it that way, I guess.
is it's about the West Portland Town Center park and ride in particular.
Okay. But I guess what I'm getting at is there again, I don't know the plan well enough. Is there a place near the West Portland Town Center on the adjacent on it, maybe not that particular site, but that would alleviate some of these concerns?
Yeah, at the staff level, we've been working with the project to consider whether there's an opportunity to increase the number of parking spaces at the next station up, 53rd. So there's not a net change in parking. It's just where we put them and how that relates to land use.
Okay. I guess I'll leave it at that. We don't need to get to it. I personally still am a little bit not understanding exactly what we're proposing here and not comfortable with that sentence, but if everybody else is, I'll move past it.
I think part of it is, as I understood it, parking, it was to de-emphasize parking and maybe not eliminate it. So it wasn't to, at the end of the day, parking was not going to disappear. It was just going to be not the first thought about how to develop that.
I support that concept. I support what you're saying. I'm not reading it that way. So I guess if people are comfortable with me maybe working with Eric on wordsmithing that section, then I'd be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a general comment about where we are with this letter. Given that it's due on next week on Monday, there's time for the chair to wordsmith in the last few days.
As long as we're hitting this kind of agreement. Okay.
If your commission's comfortable with that, right, then you have that ability.
So I guess I just kind of need to know if people are comfortable with trying to hit the comments that Eric's addressed, but not necessarily saying a total park and ride's a bad thing. Just it's how it's done and where it's done.
I'm comfortable with it, and I think I got a similar reading to you to yours, that it was kind of more of a perhaps meant a little bit more of a more broader way than specific to the parking structure. So I think there's some room to maybe make that clear in the letter.
Okay. Any other thoughts or concerns, Eli?
On displacement, a late coming thought is that on this proposal, we've got tax increment financing available in this area, which is a great tool for proactive acquisition for permanently affordable housing. So I'm glad we're using that tool, but I'm also respectful that most of the city, at least 80% of the city, doesn't have that tool available. And one reason I've liked the A overlay as an option is because in those parts of the city, which includes much of East County and West Side too, for that matter, whether it's for-profit or nonprofits, it just provides more opportunities to provide less expensive, smaller housing types, which is a private and nonprofit sector response to try and create more affordable housing options. So I'm thinking that especially in areas of the city where we don't have things like tax increment financing, that's a way that we can still provide some affordable housing there. That was one reason I see them as related issues, but different tool sets.
Mike?
Yeah, feeling at times a little overwhelmed with all of the information we have to process. I think it's great that you took this on and developed the letters, and I think it allows us to be even more effective if subsets of the commission can take on issues like this and put some thought into it and come back with a good proposal. So appreciate it.
Yeah, and to Eli's point, we did talk about the different cash flows that would be available at different points in the project, and TIF is definitely an important component, but I do want to stress that there is a need for some upfront money, probably several $1 million, even before any TIF cash flows would come online, which is why we're asking for the early capitalization and probably looking for general fund dollars to do it.
Great. Any other comments on the letters? If not, great. Thanks. Great work, guys, and appreciate you, as Mike said, taking the time to do that.
So
Thank you, Eric.
you'll then be in touch with us in terms of your final edits.
Correct. You might need to remind me. Next item on the agenda is the we're continuing work session for the residential infill project. Oh, geez, thank you for. See, I was digging for paper.
Still have items of interest to finish.
I have
right? And the
director's report. I have
yeah.
items of interest. I'm just like ready to go. Okay. Any other additional items of interest? Nope. Okay. Then consent agenda. We have consideration of the minutes from June 26th and July
You're blowing
10th.
off the director.
I'm antsy, apparently. I'm so sorry, Susan.
Gather her thoughts.
I know.
What should I say?
Susan, do you have anything to share with us on the director's report?
I don't have any major issues to cover, but this discussion has really made me think once again that I want to thank you all for all the time that you spend, and that we have a really talented group here with a lot of different expertise in a lot of different areas, and you spend a lot of hours that people don't really understand how much time goes into being on the commission, not just to be ready for the efforts that are being brought in front of you, but you're often doing letters on the side, you're having phone calls, so you're working on, the housing strategy, residential infill, you're working on transit, and it kind of all comes together here. And I think we don't pause enough sometimes to thank you for all of your efforts, and we just really appreciate all that. Sometimes we also don't pause to think about what's happening in the community as a result of the work that you've done here. So I think back to, it hasn't been that long, only a couple months now that we adopted, probably not even 2 months, the Central City 2035 plan. A part of that plan, one of the centerpieces, was the Green Loop. And just this weekend, we had a celebration on the Green Loop, when we first came out with that, we said, we're just going to start talking about it, and it will be real. And there's been really, it's not like a traditional, government project where you come in with millions of dollars and build something. This is one that's going to be built in partnership with the community. And there was the celebration of Sunday Parkways on the Green Loop, and thousands of people were there. So that's the kind of stuff I think that happens from this commission that we sometimes don't pause to think about. At least some of these things actually happen pretty quickly. So thank you.
And I was one of the thousands out on Sunday, and it was a terrific ride. But I do want to remind us that at the same time we advanced the Green Loop, the commission also made a strong point that we need to be considering equivalent facilities out in other parts of the community, including the Lentz Green Ring. So I hope there's going to be an organized ride for the Green Ring before too long.
Last year. We did that
last year.
True.
Come on.
It's been a year.
We should do it again.
Time to do it again. Right.
People forget that.
All right. Now back to our regularly scheduled
I will happily move
residential infill project.
I'll happily move the consent agenda.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. That passes unanimously. And here we go. Thank you, Joe and Morgan.
Great.
Residential infill project.
Thank you. So I'm Morgan Tracy, your baritone project manager of the residential infill project. With me is Joe Zender. I wanted to take a quick moment before we got started in our work session. There were some questions at our last work session around affordability and what the nonprofits were, what their positions were. There was some potential confusion around priorities of the Housing Bureau and what they saw in terms of independent sort of singular units sort of spread throughout the city, and whether that was a priority and whether that was the biggest bang for the buck. So just to address that particular aspect, I thought I'd invite Jesse Connor from the Housing Bureau up to just clarify that issue before we move forward.
Right.
Yep, very close.
Thank you. I don't need to get quite that close. Jessica Connor from the Portland Housing Bureau. I will be very brief. I know you got a long night ahead of you. So as Morgan said, after we had a conversation, it seemed like there was a little bit of uncertainty about how PHB would be engaging with the affordable housing bonus or any provisions from this project. I'm grateful to be able to be here to confirm some of the ideas that were expressed, represent a significant land use proposal, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to assist you in your deliberations. So regarding PHB's targeted investments, when it varies, right? When we're talking about the housing bond, that's certainly multifamily focused, whether that's new construction or through acquisition. Inclusionary housing is also multifamily focused, but that scale kind of varies, right? So generally, you're looking at buildings that are producing multiple affordable units per site, but we also have an opt-in provision, and that for projects that would provide, sort of that one-off or two units. We reinforced that we were supportive of having those sort of one-offs through the Code Reconciliation Project by maintaining the allowance to provide a unit in sites that were located outside of the central city in mixed-use zones. While PHB wouldn't be pursuing this bonus directly, so at least speaking of the way that it was proposed in the proposed draft, some of our partners could apply for funding through PHB in pursuing these projects on their own. Our primary driver for supporting the bonus was based on what we heard from our nonprofit partners. During the outreach phase, we heard from several of the folks that we work with that they saw this as a pretty valuable tool to help make homeownership work and to help increase their competitiveness in the market. So the final point that I want to touch on is that, it's been brought up in this space and lots of other spaces that there is certainly a need for affordable housing at the lower ends of the income spectrum, that's 60% and below. And we recognize that when it comes to homeownership opportunities, which we sort of interacted with this bonus on from what our partners wanted. They were looking at it as a homeownership opportunity, and that would be the way that they would be sort of seeking out properties for this, that the 80% was seen as a cap. Several partners do sort of focus at that sort of 60% and 60% range because homeownership, you need a little bit more flexibility when you're looking at incomes to get into mortgages and get financing and get things like that. So we saw it as a way to just keep a tool flexible. That was truly it. Morgan made sure that I was very, very brief. Yeah.
Andre.
So mixed use zone for your funding, not single family R5. Is that what you said? Or did you said for your funding for the bond, mixed use zone, multifamily zone?
So our partners could apply. Are you talking about how funders, partners? Yes, they could apply for funding for one of our projects in a single family zone.
Single family zone, okay. But your bond is limited to 60%, so it couldn't go for an 80% project.
Yes.
Is that correct? So what money does go for 80%?
We use, I would have to check with Matthew about some of our rehab dollars, but I do believe that the down payment assistance loans for individuals looking to get into homeownership, those go to higher MFIs.
Okay, so it's only the down payment that would qualify for an 80% single family, let's say ADU in this case. Is that correct?
So Matthew Schaubold with the Housing Bureau. Can you repeat the question?
So for an 80%, because what you're saying is 80% down payment for a single family ADU, let's say in this case, that affordable housing provider would be let's say if they built it, if they bought it and they built it, that would be how they would help in the financing, would be through the only money they could get from you would be from a down payment assistance for the purchaser.
So I think I'll answer the question in two ways. One, the Bureau specifically, and then two, money available in general for nonprofits. So the nonprofits do get funding from the state as well.
Yep.
And the state does fund some affordable developments for rental and homeownership at 30, 60, and at times 80%, either direct financing or indirect. We also have indirect with our HOLTE program, our tax exemption program, our SDC waiver program, and that can go up to 80% and 100% AMI depending on the household size, as well as our direct financing can go up to 80% or 100% depending on the household size.
But is it a priority for the Housing Bureau?
For homeownership, yeah, or one of our priorities.
No, not homeownership, but for single-family dwellings, are those priority?
Sure.
I mean,
through our
in terms of, you're saying there's a level of fund, you only have so much money.
Mm-hmm.
So is it a priority to fund those before multifamily at the lowest level, or?
We prioritize both homeownership and multifamily rental housing. And in the single family space, we are using primarily indirect, so SDC waivers as well as tax exemptions. But we also do use TIF and federal funding through nonprofits, either with down payment assistance loans at the point of sale, or a down payment assistance loan guarantee as a way to finance the construction, in order to help support nonprofits in building themselves, knowing that they'll have a buyer and a subsidy at the back end.
Okay. And how many of these have you financed, say, in the last 5 years?
I'd have to get you those numbers. I don't have them off the top of my head.
Okay. But is it hundreds or?
Yeah, it's hundreds.
It's hundreds. Single families?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a comment and a question. The comment, I've been very curious about the issue we've discussed a little bit of the capacity of the nonprofit partners to manage a portfolio of one unit here, one unit there, and spoke to several and to a person got the answer that yes, we can do that. So I was a little bit reassured by that. The question, I think we have talked about both incenting or requiring either an affordable unit or allowing a fee in lieu, perhaps in exchange for a little bit more FAR. How do you feel about if we do both, how do you feel about your ability to calibrate the correct fee in lieu? So if somebody's got the choice between providing an affordable unit or paying a fee in lieu, that you can calibrate that to make the program work.
I think that we would have to work with BPS staff to figure out, we would have to identify what the value is between, what that bonus would look like then. Yeah.
I think one of the challenges also is that the calibration varies based on the location a little bit. So if you're talking about equivalency, it's different for different parts of town. So that is a challenge.
Okay. And I'll just throw in an additional comment that one of the nonprofits poked at me a little bit about the conversation that Eli drove about dividing property lines to create fee in lieu opportunities, and suggested that would be a very important tool for home ownership. So just toss that in.
I'm struggling with this issue because we have a housing crisis, and the housing crisis, we've heard from a lot of people, is a volumetric issue. And housing at one at a time is not a volumetric decision. So when I read the housing 5-year plan and read all your plans, I don't see this as a priority listed. I see home ownership as a priority, but I don't see building single family dwellings as a priority. And I'm trying to understand funding. When you fund priorities, you generally fund the higher priorities, and so I'm trying to understand that disconnect in my mind.
Stay up here. So we fund for homeownership, it's primarily in the single family space.
Yeah.
So for us to prioritize homeownership, we allocate a certain amount of funds each fiscal year to either down payment assistance to households themselves, or to some sort of construction loan or other sort of contract with nonprofit to actually build the homes themselves. And that is done primarily in single family zones. So it's a priority for us in our budget, and we do so by allocating funds. It's a priority for the state. They allocate funds, and they allocate funds here in Portland as well as, of course, around the state. And while we have financed some homeownership on the multifamily scale. It's certainly new for the Bureau as the city becomes more dense, but I have to emphasize our homeownership efforts as one of our priorities in our budget is still primarily through nonprofit partners and in the single family space. It's only in the last 12 to 18 months that it's transitioned to multifamily ownership at a significant scale, and that's primarily in the interstate corridor urban renewal area.
And to the point of managing these homes, I'm not questioning whether or not nonprofits can manage them. It's whether they can manage them effectively. Because do you find them cost effective to manage versus on a cost per unit basis versus the multifamily?
So I don't have the. I assume are you talking about physical maintenance of the buildings?
Maintenance, yeah.
I'd have to talk to the nonprofits. I wouldn't want to say what their cost per unit is for a scattered site portfolio versus a multifamily rental portfolio. I'm sure it probably is more expensive on a per unit basis, but at the same time, for a lot of the sales, the families themselves are doing the upkeep. On the rental side, they're going to have to hire property managers to maintain the building, maintain the premises. But for whether it's a land trust or an outright construction and single transaction sale for a family that doesn't want to be in a community land trust or a proud ground model, the families themselves are maintaining their homes. So we can talk to our nonprofit partners and get more specific numbers, but that's my sense at this point.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Just real quick, Eli. Sorry, it's unusual for me, I know, but perhaps it's just where in my own mind, and the fact that as we've been talking about the bonusing for an affordable unit, it's been kind of looking at multiple dwelling units on a single family home site, and so the bonus is getting an additional unit. So in my mind, I saw the uptake more in rental than in ownership. And so how does that, so if, person owns their own home, they build an ADU in the back, decide to get another one in their basement. So now they've triggered, maybe let's say if we decide to do this, an affordable bonus to be able to do that. How does that as a rental look like and work and get managed?
So are you talking about, again, physical maintenance or regulatory compliance?
I think more just, again, I got my house and I'm trying to figure out what to do. It's like I'm worried about a sophisticated developer kind of understands how to go about it. It's even complicated for them to do multifamily dwelling units, right? Now we're just talking about a person who owns a home, trying to figure out how do I work with the Housing Bureau to figure out if this person qualifies and then to make sure the next renter qualifies and how does this get done? Or do I kind of turn it over to the Housing Bureau and let the Housing Bureau maintain it? I guess I'm not clear myself on how that works.
So, no, you're talking about intent?
Yeah, so, fill it in if I don't hit what you were going to say, but I guess I can't speak for the individual homeowner, but I can say, again, the Bureau was included with the outreach that Morgan did with this project. And, it was expressed by some of the partners that this was by and large not going to be, by the folks that were doing primarily rental, this wasn't on the scale of what they were looking for. Because it wasn't going to deliver, the type of unit, the volume that they were really looking for. But the nonprofits that were interested in homeownership or sort of are targeted towards homeownership, they were the ones who, spoke up and said, well, we're interested in this. This could be really valuable for us.
So if they're then looking for homeownership, it seems to me they're looking to be able to subdivide the lot, to be able to actually do multiple units on a lot, be owner opportunities, not rental opportunities.
We did also hear that expressed, yes.
Okay. Eli, Joe, you also look like you had your hand up, so Eli and then maybe Joe.
I think we're hitting this exactly wrong. Multifamily rental housing, you need an efficiency of scale. I think the city has a minimum number of units if you're doing a new development. It was 20 at one point. Now maybe it's 30.
It's 20.
It's 20 now. So as much as I love multifamily, love regulated rental housing, slipping into the neighborhood setting is very hard to pull off. The cities like Santa Cruz that have tried this, where they say you can build an accessory dwelling unit if it's income restricted, they get no takers because people, as you just said, Kat, homeowners don't want to deal with that. They don't want to be a deed restriction on their property for 99 years. You know, there's all these reasons why it's hard to do regulated rental housing in single-family zones. That said, a lot of times small units do get used for market rate affordable housing. A lot of them are not rented for full value, so that happens incidentally. But yes, the home ownership is where it's at. And if you have, the reason nonprofits like this, some of these models is if the city is capped, as they are right now, at $60,000, $80,000 a unit for home ownership subsidy for long-term affordability.
We're up to 100 and 125.
Oh, you shouldn't tell me that. Okay. But they're getting more. But like in order to cover the gap between market sales price and an affordable sales price, you almost have to start sharing land between different units to pull it off in close-in parts of the city. And that's why I think the nonprofits are interested in being able to split the lot or condo ownership or something. But it's all ownership model stuff. Just figuring out how to make the numbers work, you need to be able to share the property with more than one home. At least in close neighborhoods. Further out, you may still be able to pull it off with single-family detached.
One last question. So homeownership, 80% is still a cap that you'd be okay with?
For the, are you talking about for the bonus as the
for the occupant that they didn't earn over 80%?
Yeah, up to 100% for household size, depending on household size. So our current programs, if you are purchasing a 3-bedroom or building a 3-bedroom, you can use our funds if you're up to 100% of the median income. But all other cases, it's 80% AMI. Are you talking about our?
This project, I think.
Oh, this project.
Just this project
For the
is talking
bonus,
about 80%. So
we would say 80% for this
100%
project.
kind of throws us out of.
Yeah, for the zoning project. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Go ahead, Mike.
Home ownership is the way to wealth creation. I'm really happy to hear it's a priority. We need to put more emphasis on home ownership.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was helpful.
Okay, so for the viewers at home as we get started here, just a reminder, our materials that we're going to be working through are available on our website. There's an address there. Just look for the documents and resources and then the Planning and Sustainability Commission materials for this meeting. Today we'll be talking about wrapping up our direction that we've received from the PSC. There's some proposals embedded in here from the Parking Subcommittee and the Scale Subcommittee, which will thread through our conversation. We will be back in August 14th, to talk about narrow lots, including cottage clusters and the issue that just came up right now about land divisions for these additional housing types. So just looking ahead there. Reflecting back on our goals and looking at equitable benefits and costs, more increasing housing options, less expensive options, and a little bit of tie to the notion of the prioritization and diversification of where we place affordable housing options. I think the general statement is we're looking for a variety of housing types in all areas of the city. So that's part of why this is a priority for the Housing Bureau. So we've spent a bit of time immersed in the weeds, so to speak, at our July 7th, 26th, and July 10th work sessions. But now we're going to take a step back and return our focus to the broader picture. So this commission has given us direction on a number of different changes and refinements, and we've pulled those together into a revised set of proposals. So for today's meeting, what we're going to be working off of is this worksheet. It says decreased scale of houses dated 7/23/18 on the top. This is basically a revised version of the text on these 2 pages in our 8-page summary. So we're just basically going through the proposals from our 8-page summary for scale and housing options. Those are reflected here. Also in your packet, you should have a summary of the recommendations from the Scale Subcommittee and Parking Subcommittee. And just by way of sort of full accounting, we're not going to be working off of this packet, but this is just the straw polls that we've taken off the last 3 work sessions, sort of response to Commissioner Oswald's request. So with that, we'll move ahead. So the first proposal on the list here is limiting the size of houses by reducing the maximum allowable size using a max floor area ratio, FAR, for the total development of all structures on a lot. So the real headline to this proposed or revised change is that we are sticking with FAR. So our scale subcommittee met a couple times to explore a number of different alternatives. But as the Planning and Sustainability Commission started discussing increasing the size allowed based on the number of units that were on a site, this introduced a number of this added complexity to our alternatives. We were looking at switching to a more building coverage and height combination, but with each additional size increment meant a new table of building coverages and heights. So we ended up with something that was like 12 different standards for building coverage. We were also looking at other ways to mitigate for the size and scale of the structures on the site with some additional types of development standards. As the Bureau of Development Standards, Development Services contemplated all of these changes, they basically came to the conclusion that FAR, while it might be a little intimidating at first, is probably a better alternative, and we will work together to develop the materials to help our applicants through that process. The other key direction from the subcommittee was to not separate the floor area between a primary structure and the detached accessory structure. So in our proposed draft, we have a primary structure FAR and a 0.15 FAR for the detached accessory structure. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we talk through proposal number 6, but there was a general feeling that allowing for more flexibility on the site, a little more borrowing from one structure to feed the other structure was a better approach. So really the headline here is allow the FAR to be accounted for the total site altogether. So essentially, more on this as we get into proposal 6. We'll get into the details and the size limits and how this all looks. Here's a good one. So revise how height is measured. We made no changes. So we're back to the proposed draft version there. For the improving front setbacks, we had a proposal to increase the setback in the R5 zone. The Commission didn't agree with, so the change here is keeping the current minimum front setbacks at 10 feet. For proposal 4, there are 3 subparts to this. One talks about building features, the second is about accessory dwelling units and accessory structures, and the third topic is about parking. So in the first set, discussing building features, there was an issue that was raised about how the standard that limited how high a front door could be above the ground, how that would affect development in the floodplains. Staff agreed, so we've added that exemption for lots in the floodplain. There was a suggestion to delete the current requirement that applies to corner lot duplexes that says that the front doors have to face separate streets, so that requirement would be deleted, as well as the proposed requirement, a new requirement for a small covered entry over the additional units on a primary structure. So a house has a front door and it generally opens to a porch. This was seeking to have covers over either the ADU entrance, or if it's a triplex, that each of those entries had a cover over it. So that requirement is being removed in the name of keeping things more flexible. And I think we also heard that it was a problem that generally didn't come up, that people were generally providing covered entries anyways. For the accessory dwelling units and accessory structures, we'd heard a lot of concern. I think this was raised in the testimony that the proposed, especially the 0.15 FAR limit on the accessory structure, meant that we were getting ADUs that were slightly less than the 800 square feet that's currently allowed, and there's concern about impacting ADUs and their ability to be built. There were some other proposals that discussed the relationship between the accessory structure and the primary structure in terms of its height. So the change here is that we would keep the current rules in place for accessory structures. So, current building coverage, current height, current size limitations would apply. We also have in our proposal a requirement. We have in the current code a requirement that limits the size of an ADU to 800 square feet or 75% of the primary structure. We're proposing that for basement conversions that size limit go away. So if the basement is slightly larger than 800 square feet, if it's an existing basement, it makes more sense to just convert the whole thing rather than have to wall off a certain portion of it to meet that size limitation. And finally, sort of along the spirit of not requiring duplex entries to face separate streets, we would delete the current requirement that restricts the entry door for the ADU from being on the same facade as the primary house. So right now, if you have a door facing the street on the house, the ADU has to either be on a different facade or face a different direction. So that requirement would also go away. Lastly, in terms of improving building design, we spoke a bit about parking. The Commission gave us direction to delete current minimum parking requirements for residential uses in single dwelling zones. So essentially, we had a proposal that had no parking required for duplex, triplex type arrangements. This would make this would put houses on par with those. So no minimum parking for residential uses in the single dwelling zones. Lastly, we had a number of conversations with our parking subcommittee about some approaches to encourage the retention of on-street parking, and we looked at a number of different ways of doing that. And some of those recommendations will come later when we're discussing things that are sort of beyond the zoning code, and recommendations to bring forward to the City Council. This particular proposal was looking at establishing a minimum driveway spacing standard to encourage on-street parking retention. So it would, in essence, require a separation between driveways on opposite lots and the development lots of at least 22 feet, which provides for at least a 16-foot parking space on the street when you take into account the curb width, the curb aprons, or a maximum 6-foot separation, which brings the driveways next to each other on side-by-side lots, and leaves essentially no parking. You're not left with a sort of remnant curb space that is good for nobody to park at. It's not big enough to park on. And I don't know if Chris, you want to provide any additional information on that?
You want me to do the general report for parking or just focus on this issue? I'm not sure what the timing is here.
Why don't you just focus on this particular one? We'll stick with the general report for the end.
So the thing we're trying to do in general here is preserve on-street parking as a community asset as opposed to creating a curb cut for a single car that then makes the parking a private asset. We looked at a variety of ways to do that, from controlling the paving area to the spacing from the front of the house. We looked at a bunch of tools that could potentially be in Title 33 versus Title 16 or 17, which are the PBOT titles. We landed on this spacing standard as probably the best available thing we could do in Title 33. I think Eli still has some ideas that you might get a more flexible standard that PBOT could apply with greater effect in more situations if we gave them guidance to use in some of the other titles. So we're probably still a little bit undecided whether we put this in Title 33 or, in our letter to council, provide recommendations on this for the other titles, along with several other topics where we intend to provide guidance to council that we'll discuss at a later point.
Great. So I think of the 4 proposals that we've covered, just this is sort of the full package on our scale proposals. I wanted to take a little moment to talk about this one specifically because it's something new that we haven't discussed with the commission at all, and take a moment to just sort of absorb where this package of proposals on scale is, with the caveat that we are going to talk about the size and unit arrangement and all that stuff with the proposal number 6 in a few minutes. So you might have to circle back on that one a little bit.
So the question that's in front of you is, we just want to confirm that these decisions you've made over the last few weeks as we've gone through are hanging together for you, like this is the package. Confirm that. And then if there's interest in going on with this new addition about the minimum driveway distance, we would add that too. So that's the, and that will conclude our sort of discussion of this whole section.
Okay. So, maybe just go around the horn. Just give everybody an equal shot. And just if you're just in confirmation, just go confirmed. Or if you have a concern about some specific ones, maybe raise which ones those are.
I think this is a good summary, and I agree with the proposals as presented. On the parking, I'd like to know a little bit more about the details of it. I think I heard 22 feet spacing to allow a minimum parking of 16. I'm assuming we're probably going to encourage back-to-back driveways so you can save a little bit on space, but generally in favor.
Yeah, I'm generally in favor. I don't think that this is called decrease scale of houses. It feels like that happens probably on the next page, more so than on this page. But I like these recommendations. And on the parking, I think maybe we just hold that one. I would love to figure out how to regulate it in Title 33. I'm not yet convinced we can do it without having negative potential impacts on layout options for homes, because it seems, I think we've come a long way on figuring out how to write it up, but it always gets complicated when what you can build on one site depends on what's in the site next door to it. And there are some housing types where having a driveway right in the middle of a frontage is great if you have garages side by side there. But if you're not going to have garages, then the house gets pushed back, or you can have other dynamics that happen. So, and not every lot's 50 feet wide. So my instinct is to give this to PBOT as a guidance to manage for parking spaces rather than Title 33. That said, we just got from Morgan example that that's already on the books for them as a guiding principle, and I don't see it happening very much. So I'm torn on this one. Thanks.
Boy, I'm generally comfortable, but I feel we keep putting off a really important piece, which we're now going to get to. So I'm not sure how the outcome of this whole discussion we're about to have about the scale and FAR and may influence something that's already on the table. So I'm preserving the right to go back and say, in light of what we just decided on number 6, I now have a concern about one of the other ones, because I think that's the linchpin that's going to tie this all together. And I'm not sure what we're doing on parking. I unfortunately must have missed in my email. I didn't see the parking committee's report, so I'm just trying to read it now. But at some point, and I don't know whether it's tonight or another session, to maybe have the subcommittee walk us through their thinking on it. And just while I have learned and been persuaded on this idea of eliminating the parking requirement, we know that's a volatile issue, and I just want to be comfortable hearing from the subcommittee. They've sort of thought through the implications, how it's going to work out, and just I'd like to have the comfort level understanding how to respond in more depth to the opposition it's going to generate. And a final piece, and again, it may be number 6. I do still have a few issues I'm unsure from a design standpoint between Ben and Eli. I'm sure they can walk me through it at some point. So as we get into number 6, I may have some questions. Because when the package is all said and done, I just want to be sure we haven't really misstepped on some design feature, because we're really getting into some nitty gritty on how we're going to format and design lots. I just want to be sure everyone's, the more design oriented people have really thought through the implications of what we're doing. So that's where I stand right now.
I'm uncomfortable a little bit. 6 and 7 are my discussion points. Parking too. The delete the current requirement for limits the size of the ADUs. I'm just not sure how that works with 6, and it's going to all connect together. So as Jeff said, I kind of reserve the right to come back and let's talk about it some more.
Sure.
The parking, I'm just really uncomfortable in the area of parking. But you know, I look forward to the discussion to explain how this is going to work, because a lot of these are existing lots with already a parking, some kind of driveway there in these neighborhoods, especially close in. So I don't know that they're trying to understand how they're moving their existing house or something to make all this work is going to be interesting. And the other thing that I'm kind of looking for, and this is, I can't conceptualize all this, especially 6, is how does this all fit on a lot? I'm like 5,000 square feet existing, bonus it out, get to where all, and show me all the units on there and tell me everything fits on there.
All right, we'll show you that. That's
so,
coming up.
As I said, as we continue to go around, maybe if I could encourage us to just stick to talking about 1 through 4 with the caveat of, you can say, I'm comfortable with these, but I have a caveat on 6 and 7, then we'll let Morgan kind of go through 6 and 7, and I'm noting you kind of are uncomfortable, for whatever that's worth. So go ahead, Mike.
Well, I'm good with 1 through 4, and as long as I have an opportunity to weigh in on parking later, that's fine with me.
So I am generally good with these. I do have a question about the FAR fungibility point. So, you know, I get the idea that we want to be able to move FAR from the main structure to potentially multiple accessory structures. I guess I'm wondering if it's a good idea to go the other way. So we've sort of, you know, we like this baseline of an 800-foot ADU, but does the fungibility mean you could take those 800 feet and add them to the main building and get rid of the ADU? And that strikes me as maybe problematic against some of the other goals. So is that a one-way thing, or is it a two-way thing?
Can we just take that up when we get there?
Yeah.
Cool.
I really appreciate how staff has organized this, at least for me. It's easy to track, and I appreciate that. I saw when I was going through the horizontal document that on the floodplain items, there was staff coming back with more floodplain information, and one of the changes about the front door was made. And I'm not an expert in the floodplain, and a lot of what I've learned from it has come from this project, and it seems like people have concerns about what is in the 100-year floodplain and what it actually means. Like maybe the entire property isn't underwater, and that leads to different decisions about what we want to see there. What I was wondering is, I brought it up in the conversation around height, of potentially if a building's in a floodplain, would they need more height? And I saw that in the conversation around how high the front door is, it was measured from height above the floodplain line, and so I was wondering if that might be a strategy that would also work with total height for a building to allow it to be higher, to not be submerged. Yeah.
So Andres, sorry. Specific to the floodplain issues, we have a section at the end that is sort of other recommendations. There are a couple about the floodplain that I think deserve a little more discussion. This one was one where applying that requirement may force someone to not meet our floodplain development standards by lowering the floor into something they're not allowed to have. So, or filling is the other option, but they have to balance cut and fill, and that can be problematic. So on that one, we thought, well, this is really, it's a new standard that we're proposing, applying it more universally, and this really is a conflict with our other regulations. So here, there's not really a question. We kind of need to make that room. The others, I think there's more conversation that we should have.
Thank you. And then the other question I had, with the conversation that we've been having about internal conversions on 4F, so it eliminates the size restriction on basement ADUs for internal conversions, and I was wondering if we might want to do that with all internal conversions. So if there's an attic conversion that the attic is larger than 800 feet, would we be okay with that being converted to an ADU even though it is higher than or restriction. Because I think that the commission was really interested in adding more opportunities for people to do internal conversions, and so I'm wondering if that might be a exemption that we extend to all internal conversions as opposed to only basement ADU conversions.
So I just have 2 clarifying questions for you, Andres. First of all, did you say 4F? I'm having a hard time figuring out what you were referencing.
It would be this one.
It's on the front page, ADU and accessory structures.
So it's the proposal to delete the requirement that limits the size of the basement ADU conversion. And we'll actually circle back to this one with proposal number 7, which talks about incentives for existing houses.
And then just for clarification, so just making sure you say it, are you in support of kind of generally the other items? Or do you have any other concerns?
I don't have other concerns.
Perfect. Okay. And then where I'm at, just generally, yes, supportive of items 1 through 4, would like more discussion on the parking. But otherwise, conceptually, I'm supportive.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Okay, so moving on. This was from actually this topic spanned our last 2 work sessions. This is about our map for the overlay. And we are essentially replacing the formula that staff used to develop the mapping by applying the new overlay to all properties in R7, R5, and R2.5, but excluding areas with medium and high natural resource inventory, lots that are a combination of stormwater, steep slope, and landslide areas, lots with sanitary sewer constraints, and lots in the 100-year floodplain. So this was the proposed draft A overlay map, basically identified with a crosshatch, and this version is the revised version, which accounts for about 96% of the lots in R25 through R7, with some areas, dappling of areas in the southwest. Most of the northwest is out because of steep slopes and landslide history, and then small portions are excluded in other areas for the other issues that were raised, natural resource constraints or hazards.
Can I ask you, Morgan, just to go back, show us before and after one more time?
So that's proposed draft, new direction.
Thank you. And are you wanting to run through a number of things and then have us discuss, or would you like us to discuss?
So next is the size limit question. So this actually was probably a good time to talk about the map.
Could I just make one comment on this map? For the folks following along at home and who have criticized us for not including the west side, it looks like there's a lot of white on the west side. I just want to point out that a lot of that is land that is already denser, zoned more densely than anything this proposal covers, and that's why it's white, not because we're giving it a pass. So, thanks.
Andreas.
Question: from the previous map to this map, there is a little slice southeast of Cully by the freeway that goes from being shaded to not being shaded, and I'm just curious what that was.
I'm guessing that has to do with Rocky Butte, the steep slopes and landslide issues, probably.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah, I guess adding on to Chris's comment, the geography of that area is quite different than the rest of the city, and there's actually still a lot of discussion going on with regard. We did not remove the A overlay from everything that had significant stormwater concerns. We chose to go with a nexus of steep slopes, unstable, and stormwater issues. Talking to various folks at the Bureau of Environmental Services, including the director, as we heard, BES is already up against the wall in terms of actually being able to deal with stormwater in that area. So it is a concern, and Andre actually raised this in his vote to take it off. In that the implication is pretty significant as far as what the rates may need to be to address some of those issues that the Bureau is going to have to deal with. So just so we're going to this with open eyes, understanding there may be some significant impacts in terms of the city's ability to address stormwater in that area. I voted to go with the Nexus.
But correct me if I'm wrong on the follow-up there, but I thought part of it too is for redevelopment to occur, you have to prove that you can deal with the stormwater on site, and if not, then they wouldn't allow an additional unit, another ADU or something. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what happens when an applicant is unable to meet the stormwater management manual, but there are sort of 4 tiers, 4 different priorities of ways to meet your stormwater requirements. So I imagine that by and large, most people are able to engineer a solution. So it becomes a question of cost, I think, at that point. A little bit of the comfort level with BES with this proposal was that we were not expanding the allowable building coverage beyond what we allow today. But Commissioner Houck is right that the Environmental Services has concerns about existing stormwater development issues just with existing entitlements. I think the other potential implication, we're talking about waiving minimum parking requirements, but in situations where we have stormwater issues, if we are allowing for paving those areas for adequate parking to park for 3 or 4 units on the site, that's a lot different than parking for 2. So that does change the equation in terms of impervious area because we don't have a standard that addresses paving directly. So just something else to consider.
Although BES,
There's
and
still
again,
that
I can only
requirement.
speak for commercial because I really don't know for sure on single family, but commercially, you have to deal with it, whether that's actually a structure or
That's true.
site.
That's true. Also residential as well.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, Eli?
I'm just wondering on the stormwater, how much, if stormwater were not an map defining factor, how much does it matter whether stormwater is? I actually thought that we were excluding steep slope and landslide history areas, like one strike you're out. Does having stormwater mixed into that change the map much? You have an idea?
If we made steep slopes and landslide history absent stormwater, it would change it a little bit. There would be more area would be excluded.
And the NRI actually adds a fair amount up. There are a lot of streams up there that are covered by that. I'm pretty sure.
NRI is a one strike thing, so
right.
those areas are out.
Yeah. Thanks.
Andre?
I want to bring home the point of we're putting a liability potentially on ratepayers out there to potentially take care of this, and I don't think we want to bypass it lightly because at the end of the day, it's not just the people in the Southwest, it's all of the ratepayers have to pick up the tab. And you can argue rates are low or high, but it's an increase. And whether it happens or not, but there's that potential liability, and it's a real liability. And I think we just want to recognize it because we've argued about increased costs for a lot of other things in the past on other measures and very aware of it. And today I think we're not being as aware, and I just want to highlight it because it's important that people understand this comes with some liabilities.
Eli?
So I want to push back on that a moment. I do residential development. You have to deal with the stormwater on site. You can't just bucket to the city system. And in terms of what's allowed to be built on these sites, we're seriously pruning down how big a house you can do with this code update. And there's going to be a big incentive to do 2-story houses with smaller footprints because we're regulating for floor area ratio right now. So I think that the incentives from this code update would get towards smaller footprint buildings. People will want to build the 2-story option. And this, so before and after this code update, we're going to have less impermeable area. And I think it's a fair question if people are going to, maybe we do need something so you don't pave the whole rest of your site. You know, that could be a fair addition that we might need to do. But I'm feeling like the city is already pretty darn strict about saying if water lands on your property, you have to deal with it on your property. Residential zones also, it can be very expensive to do that, but that's under current rules. And those rules aren't changing with this code update. You still have to do it. So I guess I'm not feeling the anxiety that it would become a systematic cost increase because of existing rules this BES implements today.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? Okay, so maybe just just a quick hands up if you're in support of the way it's stated right now in 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did I catch that right?
What was the count?
6.
Oh.
5, 6, 7.
Okay. Moving ahead. Proposal number 6. This is where it all comes together. So here we have allowing up to 4 units and allow the FAR to increase accordingly. So the direction we heard from the commission was, if it's a house, it's one thing. If it's a duplex, it's something else. Triplex a little bigger, fourplex a little bigger. We've spent a lot of time with our scale subcommittee hashing through multiple variations of that, and I'll try to guide you through that in a minute. There was also direction to provide for additional bonus FAR if one of the units is affordable at 80%. This next part deviates for a little bit from the commission's direction, but it was a little bit unclear. So we are positing that when there are at least 3 units, that one of those units would be required to be visitable. And the third is for lots that are in non-city maintained streets, they're not eligible for these additional housing types until those streets are improved to city standards. The change here was addressing private streets, so lots on private streets would be eligible to use these additional housing types.
Clarifying question?
Yes, sir.
Did we not also say that lots on ODOT facilities would be eligible?
That's a question for the. I did not hear that.
If we did.
Yeah, I don't remember hearing this. So what was?
Lombard, for example, there are lots on Lombard. It's an ODOT facility. Yeah, so they're not maintained by the city, but they are maintained, and we wanted them to be eligible. So.
For the A overlay or for?
Yes, this would be.
Oh, yeah.
Duplexes, triplexes, on lots on Lombard, which incidentally is a concern from some of PBOT staff.
Okay.
All right, so
I do remember that now. Thank you.
Do you want to take another? Did I get that wrong, or do we want to take another poll, or come back and ask that question later?
I guess I can't remember what we discussed before. If the intent here is that you want to make these options available on maintained streets, I don't think it matters that much who maintains it. So conceptually, I think it makes sense to include ones maintained by the state.
I think we had a straw poll.
Do we have it?
For
okay.
So
Gotcha.
I just prefer you go check the record.
Fair enough. I think it was just how we tried to write that up. Okay. So here is our table. Looking at size of structures along the top are R7, R5, and R2.5 zones. Down the left-hand side are the number of units, 1, 2, 3, and 4, in their various forms, either a house plus ADU or duplex is 2 units, a triplex, a duplex plus ADU, or house plus 2 ADUs is 3 units, or fourplex. For purposes of not getting too lost in so many numbers, I put a box around R5. So talking about FAR, base sort of condition, 5,000 square foot lot. If we had a 0.5 FAR for just 1 unit, a house, with the base FAR, that's 2,500 square feet of above grade square footage. So the caveat here to keep in your heads is this could allow for additional square footage in the basement that would not be counted against your FAR. Moving from a house, if you're adding an ADU or if you're becoming a duplex or if you're building a duplex, you get an additional 500 square feet. So it goes from 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. The notion here, as we discussed in our subcommittee, is there's a little bit of an added incentive for people to add that ADU. If you're wanting to get that extra square footage for that detached accessory structure, or maybe it's just a bigger primary structure with an ADU in it, this is one way to do that. In the name of trying to simplify all these numbers a little bit, we combined the 3 and 4 units into a single number, which was 3,500 square feet on a 5,000 square foot lot. And with each of these levels, a house, the 2 unit, the 3 unit, a 4 unit, if you provide that bonus, if it's affordable or whatever bonus we tie to that, but right now we're talking about affordability, you get an additional 0.1 FAR. So in essence, 500 extra square feet in this example.
Is that shown on the chart?
The affordability was that guy. Provide additional FAR if one of the units is affordable at 80%.
So the bonus is it the column where it says with bonus?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's an A, right?
So you have a house, you build 1 unit, and you can do that just through the bonus by right.
You could build a 2,500 square foot house by right. No bells or whistles.
No bells or whistles. So to build 1 ADU, you do what?
You can build a house with an ADU, and you can go up to 3,000 square feet. So if you already had the idea here was if you already had a 2,500 square foot house,
okay,
and you were locked in, and you wanted to have a detached structure in your backyard, one way to do that would be either make an ADU in your house, add 500 square feet in your backyard, or build an ADU in your backyard, 500 square feet ish.
And then for the next 2, they have to provide some kind of a bonus, some kind of housing bonus. Let's just put it
I got
that
you.
way.
So the first, where it says base, that whole column, where it says base,
Yes.
is all allowed by right. You don't have to do any additional thing other than provide the unit to get that extra square footage.
Okay, so they can get 3 units, whether they're ADUs or internal, and up to 4,000 square feet.
If they do the bonus.
Yeah, that 4,000 square foot number, the max of
It would
that.
be 3,500. They
Yeah.
could do 3,500 and no bonus. I mean, they just outright by base, they can get 3,500 and have 3 living units.
Correct.
We did talk about if you go to 3 and up, then it's a requirement to have visitability in one of the units.
Oh, right. That's
Okay,
that's
so
the bell.
at
That was like a
3,
base when we got
not
to
a
3,
bonus.
and then we had the bonus was about
the 4th.
the 4th was about affordability.
Okay, so
And then there was some discussion when we were doing that, because we started voting then from the other end, going at 4 and coming back down. And at that point, the discussion about affordability and visitability got mushy. So we wanted to clarify again, it's our recommendation as staff that when you get to 3, you add 1 for visitability. And if you want a 4th, it's something else. If you want 3 and a bonus, then you'd have to also do affordability.
So just to be clear, you can build 3,500 square feet and do visibility, and you're good.
Yes.
Well, I think we haven't voted.
But
on it.
I
No,
think
I mean, that's what
So-
you're
According to
proposing.
this chart.
That's what you're
the way you all left it last time was that the base is just the base. It's the number of units, and that's how many square feet you can build. The bonus is, it was not clear. We have question below to clarify it, but it was visitability or affordability. And what we're recommending is what Susan just said, but we'll get to that later. But the base is for 1 unit, you get 2,500, 2 units in any form, duplex or house and ADU, 3,000, 3 units in any form, 3,500, 4 units in any form, 3,500. That's the way you left it last time, and we're going to explore adjusting that as we go through. But that's the first question we're going to ask you is, are you comfortable with getting up to 4,000 square feet in that scale? But that's how this chart works.
So I just want to add, so the concept here was at the base, basically you're getting additional square footage for the public benefit of providing more living units.
Yes.
And the subcommittee, who came up with kind of recommendations of starting with a single house at 2,500 square feet, which kind of Morgan's hinted at, was kind of the mindset. I know that the PSC had originally voted on maybe increasing that size from the original staff recommendation, but that you could easily get an increase by, let's say, building on an attached ADU as a family member. It doesn't ever mean you have to rent it out. You could use it as a family room, you could use it as a bedroom, you could, you can do a lot of things with it, and it's still a single family home. So, but what it does is allows for flexibility as that house turns in the future to other families to be able to use that space that they got through this public benefit of this ADU to be rented out or used for other families. So I think that's why. And you guys jump in here if you think I didn't explain that very well, but the thought process there. Go ahead, Eli.
I think that the staff's original proposal, the way in my mind this differs from staff proposal is it decreases the starting size, because the original staff proposal was 2,500 square feet plus the 0.15 detached structure you could do. So it's really like 3,250. This would say that we're actually starting lower and we're allowing you to get more. So we're pushing the staff proposal in two different directions. One is smaller start size, and the other is more housing options. And so it's starting at 2,500. You can just think of you earn your way up by number of units, but once you get a 3, you don't get to earn up anymore that way. And the other way you can earn your way up in size is providing affordability, another way to earn some capacity. And then we didn't actually do a straw vote last time, but there was some sense that we shouldn't let people get too big. So if we're spanning it, this sort of keeps it within the 2,500 floor to the 4,000 cap. But to get to 4,000, you have to do quite a bit of stuff. You can't just build a 4,000 square foot house. So anyway, that's the way I see the thing. This proposal sort of falling together.
And then one last thing I just wanted to add too was it's back to the desire to hopefully retain more houses and disincent on demolition, thus the lower starting point. But don't forget where it says a base of 2,500, that doesn't include a basement. So that is potentially, let's say, a 3,500 square foot house. And don't forget them with bonus, it's potentially almost a 4,000 square foot house. So, I think as we're thinking skill or size and our scale in our heads, don't forget that there is now. So what does that mean? We're incentivizing basements to be built, but you can kind of say pay to play in a way, right? You want a bigger house, then put it underground. So,
and we heard loud and clear from testimony of one of the biggest motivators is house scale. So if people need to put some of the house underground, that seems consistent. It's a relatively expensive way of building square footage, but it responds to some of the issues we heard.
And there's an interesting corollary to that in tuck under garages, which we ought to talk about when we get to the parking committee report, because we didn't report that out, but we did discuss it. So
that'd be great.
Yeah.
So on this, if we still have more presentation on this topic that'll give you the last piece of information we think you sort of need to absorb to answer the question. So before we moved on to that, I wanted to make sure that people sort of were comfortable with what you're seeing in the table, not necessarily agreeing with it, but you get how it works and what sort of the nature of the proposal is. Then we're going to talk about what the form of these different options are on a typical lot.
So I had a question. So if you're doing a single family house, base 0.5. Right. Oh, sorry. It's on. It's on. Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't speaking it. Single family house, base of 0.5. It says if you want to get to 0.6, it's a bonus. The only bonus is affordability. No one's building a 3,000 square foot house that's going to meet our affordability levels. So that's true. It's misleading. There's really, if you're doing a single family house, you're not going to get a bonus, are you? How do you get a bonus?
No, you can go.
That's a good question. It's if the only bonus is affordability, you're right. if we're putting visitability or affordability, which is where I thought we kind of left it unconcluded, but sort of vaguely at the last time. There's another way to get there, and it just brings on the visitability. But you're right, Jeff.
And another question: is this staff's best agglomeration of everything they heard, or is this the scale subcommittee's work? I'm a little confused. What the agenda? What's the author of this chart? You guys or the subcommittee?
The way I would characterize it is reflective of the scale subcommittee's work, minus the taking the question about the affordability and visitability bonuses back to the commission, because I don't think we really landed I don't think we really landed that question. So in terms of the numbers, this is reflective of the scale subcommittee work. What that bonus is sort of a point of debate still.
So I just want to add one more just clarifying thing to I think what you're asking. I actually think there's two ways for that single family home at 2,500 square feet to get to 3,000 square feet above ground. Don't forget. One is with bonus. So let's say we all agree to some bonus, whatever that is. The other would be I add another dwelling unit to that structure. So again, think I attach an ADU and use it as family room. I mean, if you just really want a primary residence, that's 3,000 square feet. There's a couple ways to go about it that I think are
right. Are we creating sort of a regulatory loophole that, okay, you want 3,000 square feet, I'll do an internal ADU. What does that mean? A second kitchen? Or I mean, then
there are rules for the ADUs that you'd have to meet, and yes, it means second kitchen. Yep.
So it's not okay.
So it is a workaround, but I guess the subcommittee in a way felt comfortable with that workaround because it at least provides the ability for that structure to be used differently in the future. Whether you all agree with that or not is obviously for debate.
Okay. And then just to understand, at one point the bonuses were 0.15 in earlier proposals.
No, they varied.
They varied.
Yeah, there was a 0.1.
0.15.
Yeah.
Let me just ask a sort of an overview question. I think this is what you said, Eli. This package kind of shrinks the box from where we were several iterations ago. Is that not? I thought there were more opportunities to have a slightly bigger box before than we are now in this proposal. Am I not remembering correctly?
So in the proposed draft, the FAR was when you counted in the accessory dwelling unit, accessory structure, primary structure, or if you were a corner lot duplex, forget the bonuses for the moment. It was all 0.65, right? It was 0.5 for the house, 0.15 for the accessory structure. On the corner, it was 0.65 for the triplex. And this kind of takes a different tax because we're allowing for more types of housing on all lots. So we were restricting the triplex to just that corner lot solution. Now we've got triplexes allowed everywhere. And we're talking about FAR being combined for all situations, not just the triplex situation. So it's sort of a mashup. I think Eli described it. We've brought the lower end, the starting end down with an incentive to add ADUs or build duplexes as a sort of jumping off point, which gets us kind of back to where we started with the FAR and total size for the lot. And then we've gone higher in terms of what we allow in terms of units and square footage total on the upper end.
So to answer the question you started with, Jeff, staff supports this approach, the gradient as you get more units, the use of FAR to do it. And we have questions about how you want to handle the bonus, but we'll get to those next. But this, as a structure, we think actually has lots of advantages because if you remember, your typical, a good deal of our housing stock's 1,500 square feet. So this whole issue of, well, what do you do when you need to do an addition? You've got room to work with, both for ADUs, for garages, for additions. This seemed to be a very functional way to get to the point that the commission was after in terms of promoting more units. The question that we really haven't concluded for ourselves is 4,000 too big or is 3,500 too big? Is it consistent with what we had talked about before? But that's one of the questions we're going to ask you. But the approach we think is actually pretty elegant. So.
Okay, so see some hands up, and I want to remind everybody we're trying to just get at questions of trying to understand this table right now, and then
Right.
obviously we'll start talking more specifics. So I think I saw
Well, I
hands up over
heard
here
that we're
first.
going to get into the bonus, which is where I want to go. So I'll
Okay.
hold off if that's
Yeah.
more appropriate.
Yep, that's great.
Well,
Katie?
yeah, hopefully this is within your restrictions. But I thought I really understood this and liked it until you started talking about a bonus on a house, a single house. That I'm not following that at all. What is the difference between one house with a bonus and the duplex, or between 1 and 2?
Yeah, I think that's reflective of Commissioner Bachrach's observation that as we've pitched this right now, that bonus is an affordability bonus. So, are we going to see a 3,000 square foot affordable house? Probably not. But that whole
So
conversation.
what would be the bonus for a house?
So that conversation depends on what your decision and discussion around what that bonus should be. Is
Okay.
it
So there's three options, though. One would be the affordability one, but one would be make it visitable. If that's how we structured this, that's not what we're recommending, but that could be a bonus. Those are really the two.
Why do we want to give a bonus to a house?
You all had a discussion of this that it was picking up on what Commissioner Bachrach just said. There was some interest of, well, shouldn't there be a way to get a bigger house? That's all. And if that's
Seems
not,
like there is now because they can dig a basin.
well, and that's
Yeah.
the kind of that's exactly the discussion for tonight. Yes.
I think I saw Ben's hand up, and then Andre, then Eli.
So I was part of the subcommittee that looked at alternatives to FAR, and then I think we looked at a bunch of different tools, tweaking the existing height coverage and setbacks, as well as looking at front facade. And I think there were a number of different tools that looked promising, but I think at the end of the day, we came back to FAR simply because it's easier to handle, and it's kind of perhaps like a slightly cleaner tool, at least at this point. I've got concerns that the FAR still doesn't really address the site and context sensitivity. Basically, doesn't really address the scale. I mean, it's just a matter a way of squishing up or down a certain floor area ratio, square footage. So I'm having a hard time picking a square foot limit, and I think it comes down to be relatively arbitrary. So the 2,500 number seems quite arbitrary to me. I would also submit that we already have added some limitations on the height. So I think we're taking down some of the worst offenders there. We're already talking about more than halving the existing FAR allowance. So, and I think, and also in terms of transparency to the public, I think if we're really serious about regulating what the form and the shape of the house should be, I don't think FAR is the right tool for that. So maybe we just park this discussion and that comes out at a later date, and we go ahead with FAR. If that's the case, I would advocate for more flexibility at the lower end, perhaps starting with a 3,000. And the reason is that by putting 2,500, I don't think that's really a response to the public concern about the scale. Is the way that we deal with that FAR, whether it's 2,500 or 3,000, can really result in forms that don't really fit. So having said that, I think it's better probably to allow more flexibility in the lower end so that we don't preclude for additional bedrooms, people sharing a larger home, larger families, whatever flexibility we need. I mean, I take your point, Kat, about, if you want a larger house, you do an attached ADU, and that's a workaround. I don't know that we need to have a workaround. I think for the purpose of more transparency, I think probably having in my mind, kind of went all the way around in circle on this, but I'm landing back on perhaps on a higher base to start with.
I think it was Andre, then Eli, if I remember right.
Well, you stole part of my thunder. I guess as I understand it, you get by right 2,500 for one. Two, if you build two, have two dwellings, you get 3,000. Three, you get 3,000. So I don't understand the difference between 2 and 3. But then 4, you get 3,500. Is that correct? Or 3 and 4 are 3,500.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And you can. So the flexibility, as we're saying, the public benefit and flexibility is just more units, and that more unit being a kitchen, essentially. So you could
dwelling
build
unit,
a 3,500 square foot house with 4 kitchens, and you would be. I'm gaming the system, but that's you could build a 3,500 4 kitchens, and that would be legal.
So I think that, and this unfortunately starts leaping into some of our other recommendations that are beyond the commission's purview, but you could game the system, but at some point, depending on where the SDC conversation lands, you'd be paying a lot of money to game that system.
Okay. And I would just, because when in my mind you start gaming the system, I end up where Ben was, is it the right base? Because I know we're going to talk about bonus, but where's the benefit of the bonus? I mean, whether it's affordable or whatever you want to call it, where's the benefit of that bonus? If really you want a 3,000 square foot house, you just put in a second kitchen and move on. That doesn't solve the base problem that I think a lot of this whole process started with from the community that we heard 2 years ago about demolitions and scale of homes. And based on scale of homes, I may be more amenable to a bigger home as long as I know the scale. And I'm not an architect, so I don't know height and dimensions and everything in my mind. I can't put together 3,000 square feet or 3,500. Could it fit in a space that is scalable in a neighborhood versus 2,500 and can be totally out of whack?
It would be
that's
great.
where I'm struggling to say 2,500 is the right base, because if the scale's not right, it doesn't matter if it's 1,000 square feet.
I think it would be helpful if we just go to the next exhibit, because it gets exactly at what you're talking about, Andre. It was an attempt to, as you see, say, okay, what's it seem like? How to give an example of fit. But just remember, too, the most effective thing, if to the extent that creating a disincentive for unnecessary demos that only produce a single unit, the most effective thing we found, right, is limiting the size of the house. So every time we move that bottom variable, we've lessened that, but it's hard to say exactly how much, but that's a finding. And it also, the more space feeds into the incentive, hopefully, for building additional units. But this exhibit talks about how they fit on a lot. And so, Morgan, you want to walk us through this?
Yeah, so looking across the top from left to right, we're looking at the number of units, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's number of units, and they increase in size from 2,500, 3,000, 3,500 to 4,000. As we go down the column, for the rows, we have a single primary structure. That's now we're talking about building form. Single primary structure, a primary structure plus an accessory structure, and think ADU, or multiple primary structures on a lot. So basically, in the top left-hand corner is your single-family house just by itself. It's one unit. You don't have an ADU. As you move into the 2-unit solution, we could have a duplex or a single-family home with an accessory structure ADU. If you want to think about what that house with an internal ADU would look like, it's sort of the same box as the duplex above, but without so many lines through the middle. And then 2 primary structures is basically 2 1,500 square foot houses on a lot. The other thing I want to comment about this is each of these models is showing the maximum square footage, FAR, utilizing all the available building coverage. So this is a maxing the building coverage solution. So again, depending on what your particular design objectives are, you might do this a little differently. You could have a larger yard and a taller house. You kind of start running out of room to get that flexibility when you get to 4,000 square feet, but there's a little ability to flex that. So.
The bottom row, at least the right two cells, aren't things that would be allowed under this proposal. If I'm
Yeah, as we've talked a little bit more in the, sorry to steal the thunder. We talked in the subcommittee a little bit about what this started to look like when we have multiple primary structures on the lot. We really have crossed the line into multi-dwelling development models. And this could be done appropriately. Again, there's concerns about site orientation and building orientation and relationship to the public realm and so on and so forth. So this can be done well, but it kind of deserves a little additional caution. So the recommendation would be that this would come along with a plan development. And you're starting to see a little bit of a preview of what a cottage cluster type solution could start to look like. So that's a future conversation, but just in terms of this table, we wanted to show sort of all these variations on one table.
So is that making sense? Are people...
And again, I want to, because and maybe I'm just reiterating this, and you guys can all tell me to stop, but it's like, it just took me a while to get my head here, is don't forget to add, you can almost add, like I said, 1,000 square feet approximately to every single one of these numbers and examples for a basement.
Yeah, it's a little hard to read, but there's some numbers that get into, it says GF and UF, that's not gluten-free, that's ground floor and upper floor. So if you think about the ground floor for the single-family house is 2,250 square feet, that's a 4,500 square foot house if you have a basement underneath that.
A full basement.
Yeah, if you did a full basement, so
basement,
take that,
right.
Number and obviously.
Some percentage of that.
Yeah. So if you want a garage or an accessory dwelling, you're going to have to fit it in this footprint as well. And
it comes out of your square feet and your lot coverage, Joe. You could put the ADU on top of the garage, so you preserve lot coverage that way, but it comes out of your square feet.
Yep.
A typical house today on the lot has about less than 2,500 square feet of coverage, or 2,500. I mean, minus the garage. I mean.
Yeah, I think even new development is not maximizing their building coverage allotment most often.
Yeah, and your 2,500 square foot house, sort of classic house, is like a 4 square, and that is not got that big a footprint.
Yeah, and so that's the scale. When I look at 3,500, it just looks like this massive taking the entire lot. I mean, you just have the slot on the side. You have the 10-foot offset. I understand that, but you have the slot on the side is.
Right. It could be taller. If you look down at the second row, the primary and accessory, there's a version of it that is the same number. Well, I guess they broke it into an accessory structure too. But yeah, even the house on top could be taller. It doesn't have to necessarily have that footprint, but it's big.
Yeah, Andre, I guess the way to respond to that is, again, the direction we gave our designer was show us the maximum building coverage being utilized, because we know that that's a finite number that we're not going to cross. So we're not going to go any bigger than that for building coverage. You could take that same square footage in that top row, single structure, triplex, and make it 2.5 stories. That's a 1.5 story structure. So add a whole nother floor to that. And in doing so, you're going to shrink the footprint, either by its side or make it shorter.
But, which I guess, not to make things more complicated, but if you feel like that's too big a house on that lot, then it's a building coverage issue, not a FAR issue that we're really talking about. Because these are all of the exact same footprint, right? They're all taking up the same amount of ground area. All they've done is gone up. So keep that in mind.
Question. Can you show us at some point, are houses being built with this kind of maximum lot coverage? Are we seeing single-family houses being built? that utilize virtually their entire site coverage like this?
No, I don't think
So
that.
it's confusing, misleading to show us, well, here's examples of what it could look like when they're not really realistic because no one's building it. I mean, I look at this and I'm almost ready to side with the neighbor associations and go, oh, this is too big. Look at it. Oh my God, these are monstrosities.
Can I editorialize on these?
To have something other than cartoon sketches, maybe real pictures, because I'm trying to get to Ben's point of how do we get the right scale, and you're showing me, well, here's something that doesn't look good. It could happen.
I think one of the things that catches my attention is the ground floor being quite a bit larger than the second floor on these. And for the same reasons I think Kat brought up in multi-development, people stepping in buildings is expensive. I think that in single-family homes, the ones I see going up, the first and second floors are almost always the same size. Mm-hmm. So it's much more likely that if someone's going to try and max out a site, they're going to have a smaller footprint than this, and it's going to be just a two-story building with the trusses on top.
So your example at 3,500 square feet, the middle box, that has a primary residence of 2,700 square feet above ground, right? So you can see if you imagine that ADU not being there, I mean, you can see how much lot coverage is remaining, or how much more in comparison.
Yeah, that's probably our best example of something that's typical. And think about this too. It's 2.5 stories. So when we talk about the scale issue that Ben was raising, we have a variety of tools in this code to try to get at that. 2.5 stories was one of the marks that we thought typically is going to give you a more contextual limit. It may not be that big a building, but if it is, that's not unprecedented. You get to 2.5 stories, just as the second row shows, the footprint gets smaller, and it starts to look more familiar to a typical Portland R5 pattern, which in part is what gave us confidence that something in the range of these kind of FARs is appropriate. And remember that the biggest house that we saw built in 2017 was 4,700 square feet. Your typical structures of our historic stock is in that 1,500 square foot range. So that's in part, as arbitrary as it seems, how we arrived at 2,500 square feet, a step towards the more modern preference to bigger unit, not unprecedented because 4 squares can be that big or a little bit smaller, and leaving enough room for existing houses to expand and be modified and kept in service.
I guess another data point to throw into there. So when we looked at the 2013 building permits on lots over between 4,950 and 6,000 square feet, the highest FAR that we saw was 0.9, the lowest was 0.13, and the average of all those permits together was 0.5. So that's a little bit of how we landed on that 2,500 square foot number.
So we sort of think it's a robust sort of range. But as you get to the 4,000 square foot end, it's big.
Chris?
Can we go back to the prior slide?
Oops. There we go.
So some questions and a comment. So part of the reason we chartered the FAR subcommittee was to explore alternatives to FAR, right? And I think what I've heard offline, just want to get in the meeting record, is that BDS has essentially withdrawn their objection to using FAR. Is that correct? That they didn't think
correct.
anything else we looked at was simpler than just using
This,
FAR,
in
right?
the end, after we worked all the way through it, was the simplest, most direct.
All right, and I'm fine with that. I hear the issue that Jeff and Ben are raising about, is there a way for somebody to just build a 3,000 square foot house? And I think we should answer that need. I don't think we should answer it by just shifting the whole spectrum up. I would suggest the way to provide that would be to allow an alternate form of the bonus, which is a fee in lieu for affordability. And the question I asked the Housing Bureau representative was, could you calibrate a fee in lieu that balances against providing a unit? I think we should seriously look at that. And maybe I'm stealing your thunder from a slide that's coming, but I thought it was important to get it into the discussion at this point. So give us some alternate ways to get there, but still have a public benefit.
Right. And I'm just going to appreciate that. At the same time, I feel more comfortable with actually getting the extra unit in there. It's not a huge lift for a homeowner to add a second kitchen. They don't talk about what size that kitchen has to be. It can be a very simple kitchen. And in the future, we now have the building stock ready to go to let that be another dwelling unit. So that's just where I'm at on that, and wanted to share that.
And just to follow up on that a little bit, I also want to touch on the visibility issue because while I certainly appreciate the intent of getting visible units, as Kat just said, it's about getting units out there, right? We want to get units into these high opportunity neighborhoods, and creating a barrier of requiring a visible unit potentially puts some drag on that. I wonder if the visible unit shouldn't be another bonus rather than a requirement. It should factor into this as one of the bonus options.
Well, so if we're ready, we could move to the questions too, which, because these are all, you're setting up the questions we want to lead people through.
We have 5 hard ones and 1 easy one.
And so at the bottom of the second page, under the table on your handout, this may be the easiest way. If we're going to keep, I'm sure we'll keep toggling back up to look at the drawings or the table, but the first question is the PSC comfortable with the scale of the development proposal, 4,000 square feet? Is it consistent with the objective to limit the size of homes, to increase compatibility, to decrease unnecessary demos, that whole sort of tactic that's built into it? And we understand that it's a judgment call based on approximate information, but we're looking for a level of comfort on this scale. The high end of the scale at 4,000, is it in the right spot? Then we can talk about how to get there.
Sorry, still reading. Chris?
So just to introduce a concept to make the discussion more complicated, and I do want to express my appreciation to staff, because the commission, we're spiraling in on this and we're dragging you through a long path to get there, and I appreciate your patience in letting us get there. I'm personally good with 4,000. For people who aren't, would you consider 4,000 just on corners and 3,500 in interior lots as a variation if you're not comfortable with 3,500?
Mike, I believe you were next.
Pardon?
Did you have your hand up? I thought you had your hand up next. Up.
My thumb up.
Okay, Andre, Jeff, let's just go around the horn then.
I'm uncomfortable with 4,000 because I'm uncomfortable with the whole bonus thing and how that works. And I'm uncomfortable with scale because I don't understand the scale. I'm not getting how big the house is going to be if it's 3,000 and you just put another one in, or 3 units or 4, and the diagrams are just not doing it for me. And I'm looking at, from my reference point, when there was the big discussion about, houses out of scale, going by those homes and looking at the scale of those homes relative to what was next to them built, and in my neighborhood and then other neighborhoods, and looking at those and thinking about, it was still the height. It was just the width. It was just this, all of a sudden you had nothing but house, and then you went to another house that had trees and things that seemed compatible with the neighborhood, and this other house was just house and a concrete driveway slid along the side. And I don't know if we're getting to that kind of scale for me. So I'm uncomfortable with it, but.
So can I maybe ask something to that? From what you're describing to me is more how the house perhaps presents itself to the street, which
Yes.
maybe we could talk about that as a discussion versus, or are you concerned or with how much it fills up the lot towards the back? So in other words, if you limited the street facade and it grew longer, the backyard got smaller, but still met lot coverage required, whatever we said, is that acceptable?
Yes, because I said originally, to me, this is a process about what you see. Once you get past that facade, you do a lot of things behind it, but people complained about what they saw on the curbside. They didn't, there was less complaints about what the backyard looked like. And to me, it's, if the house just looks out of scale, when you drive by, it's out of scale.
So where my head's going with what Andre's saying is perhaps we need to have a discussion about side setbacks. I mean, in all honesty, because it seems like if other people agree that that house facade is filling up too much of the frontage and you want to narrow that, I mean, that's...
I would guess that of all the setbacks that is typically met in the city on our single-family residential lots, a high percentage of it is going to be the side setback. So that pattern is
pretty established
here from the beginning of the 20th century. That setback is not the one that I think varies as much as some of the others, but I could be wrong. But it's maybe earlier on that it was a 1,500 square foot house sitting in that space. But remember, today you can put a 6,000 square footer in there. And so at a 4 square, which I keep going back to because it's about 2,200, 2,500 square feet, is that old-fashioned typical form that works with the setbacks that looks, is a context house, just in a lot of at least the inner east side. So I think I realize we haven't given you enough to get comfortable with the variation on the scale, but I bet the side setbacks is the one that is the most often followed.
Okay. Then I think the only other thing I can think of to address Andre's concern is height, compatibility, and then I don't know. I guess that's kind of what we're left with, right? With front facade and then obviously front setbacks.
I guess I would introduce, and this sort of runs a little counter to Commissioner Smith's objective for fee in lieu, but when we're trying to contemplate Commissioner Bortolazzo's concerns about how things are designed, how they present themselves on a lot to the street, trying to develop a development standard that says, modulate and articulate and respect your neighbors. You can't write a clear and objective standard that does that. That's that's why design review is applied, because we use criteria and we use discretion to get there. And we're not going to talk about design review for single family houses. So it's a little bit of a conundrum, but one way to address that issue about context is you come up with a size that's comfortable, that meets 80% of the situations that you're comfortable is going to fit in most of the time, and you provide for that flexibility through an adjustment process that looks at the purpose statement when you're trying to exceed that standard. So if you're trying to go bigger, then you got to show how your proposal is equally or better meeting the purpose of not overwhelming the adjacent development in scale and bulk. And so you do that through mitigation of how that building is designed. That's the proposal that you put forward, and it goes through a notice, and there's the decision that is appealable. So there's the downside to that is the added cost, time, and expense, and uncertainty of that process. But the upside is you can now fold in those types of factors that you cannot possibly write development standards for. So that's a little bit of where we're trying to get is what's a good fit most of the time, and worry about something that may not always sit well, deal with that with a discretionary review process.
The most effective thing we can do to have a shot at creating incentive of having more than one unit developed is clarity, simplicity, work within sort of a rule system that's consistent with the way it's done now. And when you look at what gets built now, there's still a wide variety, even though we have with the setbacks and the lot coverage and the rules that we have. My expectation is that this will function in a similar way. Will it keep ugly from getting built? Not necessarily in every case, but it gives you the same kind of parameters that we have today, only scaling it down a little bit and allowing you to have more units in it. So it's a predictable, understandable way of approaching that.
I think everyone was just going to go around the horn.
I appreciate we can't create design review, which makes it hard to achieve. How do we not end up with a lowest common denominator that forces out a lot of creative ideas that can't fit? But in response to the specific before us on this chart, I am bothered with even more than R5 is R7, and we didn't talk about that. R7, that's an unusually large lot in the city these days, so Eli tells me there's more of those than I think. But that means it's a 2,800 square foot house. And so we're sitting here going, well, is 2,500 too small? Should we give people an opportunity to do a 3,000 square foot house? It seems to me if you have an R7 lot, you should be able to build something more than 2,800. So I really would like to see us get that to at least a 0.5. So at least on those large lots, there is an opportunity to get to a 3,000 square foot house, which isn't the most popular size, but it does have a constituency that wants it. So I really hope we could take a look at bumping R7 up to R5 base. That would. And other than that, I'm still struggling with the 0.5 base in the R5, but we're not done with that one, so put me on the fence on that, and let's see where the bonuses end up. I'm sorry, and I'm okay with a maximum at 0.8 because I just don't think it's going to be achieved very often. That's a fourplex, probably with an affordable unit and a visibility unit, and I suspect we're not going to see those proliferating around the city. So, and that's still smaller than what's allowed today. So.
Okay, well, Jeff, you just stole my thought on that last item. I think that for 4,000, I'm comfortable with it because it's awfully hard to achieve. And creating additional kitchens is not just kitchens. You have to also separate electrical service, wall it off, have a bedroom in there. But yeah, 4,000, you got to have multiple units, and one of them is affordable. Or maybe there's an in lieu, but it's not easy to get there. That makes me more comfortable with that option. And I really didn't look at the other columns very much. So I did think that there are some pretty small lots, like there's some 3,000 square foot R5 lots out there, which would be capped at 2,000 under this scenario. So it may be just for staff looking at this, if there's situations where we need to say, you definitely can build this big of a house in the zone on like a small little lot, that I guess I'm saying if there's concern that we're making the FAR too small, then it might be worth looking to see if there's situations where on a smaller version of that zone lot, it becomes even really smaller. Then maybe we put a floor on this. Thanks.
I basically like this quite a lot, and there's just around the edges in terms of. I was struggling with the idea that a house would have a bonus, but actually, if it's a fee in lieu, if that's set high enough, it doesn't bother me because then you do get a public benefit for that. The 4,000 square feet seems like a lot, but you would only get that if you were doing a low-income rental. So I'm fine with that.
Well, that is, we would have to agree to that, Katie. Just heads up.
Yes, I know that.
Yeah, if we agreed to that, got it. Okay.
In my mind, part of the difficulty that we're having about this discussion is that we're using FAR and square footage as a proxy to scale. And I understand that to some extent it is, but it's kind of a long shot because it's not really a direct relationship between scale and there isn't that direct relationship. So I just want to clarify. I think I do agree that FAR might be a cleaner, simpler way to go. But considering the height limitations that we're imposing and considering that we're already providing a major reduction in FAR, I'd rather be a little bit more conservative on the low end and the high end and allowing that flexibility, see how the system works on the basis that this is not really regulating scale. So let's allow that flexibility. This is already a major change. I'm not sure we want to go the extra mile to really really clamp down on design opportunities, possibilities, and variety, etc. All the good things that we like about our neighborhoods.
Yes, Joe.
then I just want to make sure I was tracking. So what would that look like in the table? Like what would get adjusted? The top and the bottom is what you're saying?
I think the top, I think 4,000 is probably just fine. As I mentioned earlier, I would advocate for a higher base. So going 2,500, say 3,000 is probably plenty.
So can I maybe just, Andreas would like to speak. I would like to give him an opportunity. I was going to say, maybe what I do is just get a straw poll on the high end and the low end and just see if we kind of have consensus or not. But I would like, if you want to say something, Andreas, certainly give you that opportunity.
Could staff remind me of the average home size? I know this number's been thrown out there a lot.
Yeah, average citywide is about 1,500 square feet.
Right. And so I guess that's been an anchor point for me in this conversation, to keep coming back to what is the average home size and what is the new home size we're seeing. And so we're seeing a pretty clear trend of the average home size being smaller than the new home size, which tells that the new development is typically a lot larger than existing development. And so I guess that, for me, has anchored the conversation in really focusing on how we keep FAR smaller to prevent an incentive to do a one-to-one replacement with a much larger unit than what is the average home size. And I respect and understand the conversation around scale, because I think it's important, but this commission formed a subcommittee to talk about alternatives to FAR because there was a concern that FAR wasn't the right tool. And then as part of that subcommittee, we looked through all of the different options of how we could build an envelope beyond height, beyond building coverage. We looked at street-facing facade. We had conversations with BDS on how many different measurements we could do based off of different story structures. And what we got to was it's just too complicated. And so I guess I've been really interested this entire time in, is there a different way we can regulate scale, and still have not found the clean way. But obviously there's always going to be developments. We're going to pass whatever gets passed, and people will start building things and we won't like it, and council won't like it, and neighborhoods won't like it, and there will always be those one-time situations where this building's ugly no matter what we tried to put in the code. And so I respect continuing that conversation, but I guess for me, it feels like we have made a good faith effort and really tried to think of how we can put restrictions that will address the biggest harms that have been brought up to be solved through this process. And then again, with the size conversation, it just seems like I still have struggled this entire time to really understand this hypothetical developer or household who just really wants a 3,000 square foot house in an R5 5,000 foot lot, not including the basement, and that should be the situation that we anchor to drag up the base, the lowest size on this project. And so I know I don't vote and I don't straw poll either, but it just seems like a pretty clear cut. Are there some sympathetic situations that will not be included in this? Yes, but it seems like that is on the fringe of what this plan is addressing. And really quick, for the fee and lieu conversation, I know we'll get into it later.
I think, well, for what it's worth, I'm supporting staff's proposal. Andreas, you said it beautifully. I think scale is well covered with the other measures of height, setbacks, coverage, and definitely support being at the lower end, the 2,500. Again, just for what Andreas said, it took me a long time to get there. By the way, when this proposal first came out, kind of shocked. But again, I keep going back to, yes, that's a pretty big home by the time you really think about it and all the possible minutia one can go through. And then additionally, I was also one who was very reticent to support a FAR solution, but I'm there now, and I agree with all the complexity and the things that we're trying to achieve. It's the way to do it. So let's just kind of quickly around the horn, try to go see where we're at with our people comfortable with 4,000 as a high end. And let's just kind of straw poll, raise your hand. And again, we're talking R5 zones. Okay, that's 8. And then,
anything. I just wanted to say that I support that, but I want to get something for it.
Fair. Okay. And then, are people comfortable on an R5 lot with a base being a 0.5 or a 2,500 square foot above grade home? Six. Did I count that right? 6. Yes.
So if I'm going to ask Morgan to put this diagram back up. And this second question may seem small compared to what we just discussed, but it's an important sort of element. And we're just confirming, and I got that we're sticking with, so once again, I'm at the bottom, on question 2 at the bottom of page 2. Does the PSC agree that we should
Can I
retain?
interrupt, Chair?
Yeah.
We didn't go to R7 and R5, or R2.5 on the chart.
Oh.
And I guess I'd ask if I've gotten anybody persuaded from the other side on the R7 to raise the base from a 0.4 to a 0.5. Again, these are larger lots.
Why don't we just do straw polls on all of them, and then we can see. How about that? And we'll start with R7, and then we'll also double check on R2.5. So R7, what this is saying is a base of 4,200 square feet.
The base for on the low end would be 2,800 square feet. I'm looking at a 7,000 square foot lot, so R7.
Yeah, sorry. So I was going to start on the high end like we did on the other
gotcha.
one. So high end base for an R7 is 4,200 square feet. Gotcha. So we'll just do a straw poll like we did before. Are you in support of that? Seven. And then on the low end for an R7, the base would be 2,800 square feet. Are you in support of that? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then just since we're doing it, to confirm it for our 2.5, that would mean at the high end, this is a house that is 2,250 square feet. At the high end on an R2.5. Are you in support of that? Seven. Do you have your hand up or not, Mike? Are you not sure? Down. 7. Okay. At the low end on an R2.5, the size would be 1,750. Are you in support of that? Six. Okay. So it looks like generally pretty much support for the table.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next.
Sorry, can
yeah.
Did we just, I wonder if staff could just, not right now, but did we just severely curtail what we can do in 2.5? Is this way smaller than what's being built in 2.5 right now? I don't need to know right now. I guess I'm just doing some mental math in my head. 2,250 on a lot. I mean, I'm seeing some houses over ADUs in 2.5 zone. If they're all way bigger than what we just said here, then I guess maybe for follow-up we could find that out.
Yeah, so we can follow up with some numbers. I think one of the other, this is where we start to cross over into better housing by design a little bit, but what we're trying to do with the FAR numbers is get the range to line up with where multi-dwelling zones pick up. So that's a little bit of our ceiling there, this struggle.
Can I make one other request? It's something Eli brought up, that you do have a fair number of R5 lots that aren't 5,000 square feet. They can be more, they can be a little less. And I'm not sure where the number is, but I liked Eli's idea. At a certain number, you get a minimum 2,500 square foot house. I don't know if it's at 4,200 square feet or whatever, something less than 5,000 square feet. You're in an R5 zone, you still get the minimum house size. And I don't know where the right cutoff number is, but maybe you guys could come back with an idea like that and see if there's any
Okay.
support on the commissioner. We can take a nod of the heads and see if people want you to even investigate that.
Okay. Okay, question 2. And this, yeah, but that was good. Thank you for leading us.
That was the hard one.
It was good to be complete about that previous one. So, we have built the system here where we're still paying attention to the fact that you have primary structures and accessory structures, and we're allocating the floor area that can be shared amongst all those structures according to that division. So we just want to confirm that everyone's comfortable with that. As the size or scale of house subcommittee said, that when you start getting multiple primary structures, a bunch of houses of the same scale on a lot, it becomes something different in that we actually, through the cluster homes, are going down a whole path to allow that. So, but on our standard single dwelling lot approach, it's primary and secondary. Okay.
Any discussion on that or questions? Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So if we go to, well, I guess in either eventuality, I'm not sure how much fungibility we've added, but is there a scenario where you get the small building in front and the big building in back?
Chris, even today, I think there are examples of the small building in front becoming the ADU.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
You would have to get an adjustment to do it, but it's, especially when you're talking about retaining an existing house, it's pretty easy. Well, I shouldn't say that on the record, but
it's possible. And in the context of trying to fit in with neighborhood context, that's an unusual situation.
Mm-hmm. But we're not doing anything in this proposal in either variation to prevent that, right?
Okay, not.
Thanks.
Does the code currently define primary structure?
Yeah, it's the relationship size between the one structure and the smaller one.
And there's a scale you have to meet. You can't. Your secondary can't.
Yes.
Get to, okay.
It's a percentage of the primary. Yeah.
No, it was answered.
Okay.
Okay. We good?
Any other questions or deliberations? So straw poll on that. Just do you agree that we should retain the limitation of one primary structure on a lot with multiple primary structures only being allowed through a planned development? So if you support that, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Clarification, primary structure, if you have 4 townhomes built to the 2-hour wall townhouse standards, would that be one structure?
Yeah, so I think
Okay.
if we look at the fourplex upper right corner and imagine those being divided with common walls, that's still one structure. It would be one primary structure. One code would call it townhouses, our zoning code would call it a fourplex.
Okay, question 3. And this is about visitability. So in the next 2 questions are getting into the bonus discussion that we've been setting up. So question 3 is, should visitability be a bonus where you get extra FAR? So it would be if you provide a visitable unit, you access the bonus with bonus FAR column, or should it be a requirement that once you get to 3 units or more, one of those units must be visitable? And the discussion that you all had last time was that there was one point of view that when you look at the value of the additional FAR that comes with doing 3 units in our table, even with or without the bonus, the value of that is probably enough to cover visitability in one of the units, sort of the construction cost parts of this. Not that it can't be a complicated situation on any given lot. So that we were I'm getting a little confused myself on this. We were recommending that it should just be made a requirement for the 3rd or 4th unit rather than something that you bonus. You're already getting 500 square feet when you get to 3 units. That bonus, that sort of premium itself, should be enough to make it possible to cover the cost of visitability of one of those. And then it leaves the rest of the bonus FAR available for affordable housing, not sort of mixing the two together.
And as a way of sweetening the deal with visitability, we're picking up from a suggestion that we provide an exception for the lots that slope up significantly from a street, basically 20% slope between the front door and the street lot line.
Yeah, all those situations where that makes it difficult, those provisions will still continue to work, but this was how we treat it within the bonus, as a bonus or not.
So my concern with having it be, it's a requirement for, let's say, the third, or once you hit the third unit versus a bonus, is that for an existing home to do an internal conversion, which again, to internally take an existing home to three is a huge deal, and it's probably not going to have a lot of uptake, let alone take an existing home to 4 units. But you're probably, if you're going to do it to 3, at that point, you're going to do it to 4, most likely, just to help pay for all of that work, would be my guess. Eli, you can tell me right or wrong. So I guess where I'm going with this is, to me, this hurts that option. And so I'm more supportive of it as being a bonus, to allow some flexibility for that internal conversion to kind of take care of, like I said, if they need some extra square footage, then, or they want to do that, they can take that extra square footage to actually handle that. And that's a way to help offset the complexity and the cost of doing 3 or more units. So that's just my personal opinion.
So just a clarification quick. We have an existing exemption for existing structures. So if you're doing an internal conversion, that would already be exempt from the requirement. But if you're
it's exempt from having to get the bonus. So how do you get?
So if it's a bonus, there's no exemption, right? So you have to do it to get the bonus. But if we're going to make it a requirement, we would have exemptions that say it's an existing structure that's being converted would be exempt. If it's a steep slope lot thing, it's exempt. So you have exemptions if it's a requirement, but if it's a bonus, you have to do it.
Visitability is not required for conversions, and the judgment that we built into that thinking was the conversion itself is a public benefit.
Okay. Well, then that takes care of that concern for me. Any other questions, thoughts? Okay, so we should probably just, it seems like we've got a straw poll that people are in support of, once you've hit 3 units, that extra unit, and this would be go for 3 or 4, one of those units has to be visitable. Did I say that correctly?
Correct.
Yeah? Okay, so are you in support of that proposal? Six.
Okay, question 4. This goes to the affordable bonus. So the question is, should we give affordable units an FAR bonus, as is shown in the table? So if you, or only allow 4 units through the affordability bonus. So the distinction here is this, and we were asked to go talk with affordable housing providers and take a look at the economics of this between our last meeting and now. And the developers we talked to and the pro formas we ran can show that there's a substantial difference in value, residual land value, that an affordable housing project could capture if it got an extra unit. There's some additional value, but more additional convenience, I suppose, or just sort of product with the FAR bonus. But the difference is that with the FAR bonus, you're also building a bigger unit. So you have additional construction costs and all the costs that just go per square foot. So the real affordable bonus pop came with the additional unit. But the reason you all backed away from that, well, one of the reasons you all backed away from that the last time you discussed this was to do that. That would mean that 4 units is only achievable. For instance, if the extra unit is that 4th unit, it's only achievable for an affordable housing developer. Because once again, remember, the pro forma analysis that we did found that the extra value you get from getting an extra unit is not enough extra value to be an incentive for a market rate developer to make one of those units affordable. It's a value, but it's not that much. an affordable housing developer who got to look at a lot and say, oh, that's 4 units to me versus 3, could be able to pay more for the lot. There's more value in it, so that it might help in a bidding situation to make it more economically feasible for the affordable housing developer to get the land. Marginally, it's not huge, but our conversations with Rose CDC and Habitat and PCRI, they saw potential value in that. And if the game we're playing here, or if the prospect we're working on is increasing housing options, it was consistent with that. The alternative is the one where we're the bonus instead of the unit. You can get up to 4 as of right, but you get 500. You get the extra FAR. Less attractive for the affordable option. So before we left that, I wanted to just offer your reconsideration of how cost effective we wanted the affordable option to be.
So what does the FAR option do for the market rate developer in terms of incenting an affordable unit?
Nothing.
Really not enough.
Not much. It doesn't do much for, even for both, there's an extra value to 500 square feet, but it's, it's the, I would say it would almost never be used. Eli?
I think it's probably safe to say nothing does enough for a market rate developer.
Yeah, nothing does enough for a market rate developer.
It's a question of how much sweetener we do to the affordable housing mission-driven developer.
We were trying to find something that we had a lot of discussion, like, are we kidding ourselves about the affordable housing aspects of this? Because it is single family. We had that long discussion. This was the most effective play we could find economically for a mission-driven developer. And the trade-off is, if you really want a as-of-right path to 4 units that isn't tied to a bonus, we give that up to get this, and we were deferring to your all's judgment on that.
So you would get less fourplexes overall, but the fourplexes that did get developed would have an affordable unit.
That's the proposition. Yeah, that's what we think would happen.
The other thing that I heard from just today was it's probably more home ownership directed than rental, which
for the 4-unit buildings.
Affordability.
Yeah. So if you're talking home ownership, now you're talking about trying to separate out a fourplex, which I guess is you could do condo.
It's being done increasingly, yeah. I mean, historically in Portland, there's been few condo ownerships or splits in the single-family zones, but it's becoming much more common. Yeah.
So it just seems like we're trying to fit a very small public benefit here through a very small needle, and I'm just, if we want to do the bonus, I'm not opposed to the bonus, but I'm really actually in favor of fourplexes on corners. Let's get the fourplexes on corners, because this seems, as proposed today, to limit that avenue.
Can I make a pitch for one of them? If we're doing discussion, I mean, I totally get that. I think Joe did a great summary. The nonprofits get more of a bump up from going from 3 to 4 units, but that involves pushing everything else down. I feel more comfortable with the second option of providing the bonus FAR, recognizing that it's not going to be used that often, but it does get you more of a chance of family-sized units. And to Jeff's point, it's most likely to be used with a 3 or 4plex situation rather than a 1 or 2. But heck, if someone wants to do an affordable unit, a 1 or 2, let them do it and get the extra 500 square feet for that. So I guess I'm leaning towards you get the bonus FAR, but we don't camp down everything to 3 units.
Any other? Go ahead, Andres.
I see it as a separate conversation, but for me, the fee in lieu was connected to the affordable housing bonus. It isn't here. And I feel like that, for me, the draw to a fee in lieu would be that if someone was interested in having a 4th unit and didn't want to regulate affordable housing, that they'd have the option of paying an equivalent cost, roughly the same as providing an affordable housing unit?
Yeah, that's the next question, Andres. So we're didn't drop it.
Great.
We're bringing it back.
But if I guess I'm struggling with the FAR, because it's only, you're really talking the fourth unit, because the third is visible in terms of what we've said. So when you go to 3, you're doing visible, so you've increased the cost a little bit, but you got the third unit.
Right, but you've also gotten the third unit. See, I should have the table.
3,500 square feet.
Yeah, you've gotten to 3,500 square feet by just the third unit. And we think that that second additional 500 square feet will cover those costs. That's our estimate.
I'm clearly in the minority here, but this is, I just think calling it affordable really waters down the idea of anything affordable. It just says that, first it said 80%. You're talking about very few units and, being a stretch for the nonprofits. I mean, it just, you add up all the things you've got to do, and it's got to may even have to be a planned development. How many hurdles do they have to get to that unit?
Surprisingly, you've convinced me, for whatever that's worth. I haven't been supporting the affordable option. I think the way you're putting it, though, and again, I think partly where I've been is this project is all about housing options, providing a more variety in the market. And this is just one way to perhaps incent another option. And yeah, we're not going to get a ton of it. We're not going to get a ton of triplex internal conversions either, and we're still trying to figure out how to incent those. So, right, I just see this as, if we even just get a couple fourplexes out of it and an option for one of those to be affordable, it's just another option on the table for people. And so I'm supportive of it personally, but we need to take a straw poll.
So if we could, this is a little tricky one to frame up. So let's say the straw poll is to stick with the affordable unit bonus as an FAR rather than to tamp down the cap of 4 units to 3 and are people tracking what? Okay.
I don't think that's true, because you can have 4 units. They just don't have to be affordable. So I'm not arguing to tamp down 4. I'm good with 4.
Oh, right.
Well, I think there's 2 ways to look at it.
Yeah, you had a whole different path on it, correct?
There's one to say you don't get the 4th unit unless it's affordable. There's another option to say you can have a 4th unit, and if you're going to do it, you get a bonus.
Right.
So there's 2 options.
So
if it's affordable.
If it's affordable. Sorry. Okay. Thank you.
Let's pull those separately then, maybe is clearest. And so, the first one would be, should you be able to get to 4 units as of right without an affordability requirement? Like you can get to 4 and without providing an affordable unit.
Can I ask one question?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're kind of, or maybe you're tying it into something else. Because the other thing that's playing into my mind, again, I'm going back to internal conversions. So new build, I kind of have one thought in my head, internal conversions another. So, for instance, I would be a proponent of saying you can internally convert an existing structure into 4 units and one does not have to be affordable. So to me, that's kind of a separate thing, because I think the only way to get internal conversions to happen is to give them more options to potentially do that. So
that's number 7. So
but are we saying that internal conversions are not a part of this discussion? It's just new build? I just want to, make sure that.
Well, what we would do in number 7, you're going to explicitly take internal conversions out of this discussion, right?
Yeah. So here's where it gets a little challenging, is because we're trying to encourage or incent or bonus a number of different things, internal conversions being one. So if we want to give internal conversions a leg up over new build, and we say new build can go to 4 with no strings, then we're kind of left with what do we do with the internal conversion? Where does it go? What can we give them? And we're kind of capped at 4 from other conversations we've had around other things. So if 4 is our max, and that's the incentive or bonus that we want to leverage, then we have to think about how this plays out for the new build scenario, which is getting to this conversation around maybe we hold that for the affordability, or I haven't heard any new ideas for other bonuses, and I don't want to introduce any. But so that's a little bit why they're separate questions, but they are a little bit linked to each other.
Okay, so should we take it at the first straw poll is the base is 3 units, and you actually bonus to the 4th unit, not square footage. You're actually getting an extra unit by providing affordability, and let's just put internal conversions on the side for now.
Correct. So to use the same language we use for visibility, affordability would be the requirement for the 4th unit, as visibility was the requirement for the 3rd unit.
So much clearer.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Much appreciated.
And that could potentially include a fee in lieu depending on the next.
That's the next thing.
Right. Okay. That's the part that.
It could potentially.
Right.
And just to clarify, this
might not.
This would apply for corner lots as well as in internal lots.
Correct. We've lost that distinction.
And to clarify, this is not what the table shows right now.
Correct.
Correct.
Just changing the table. Okay.
Correct. Okay. So all in favor of that option, raise your hand. It's a requirement to have the 4th unit be affordable. So 1, 2, 3, 4. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
If I just interpret that means that the only way to get 4 units is if everyone's ever going to happen. Is everyone clear on that? From what we've heard.
That's
okay.
So far.
No, it won't happen.
Well, it will happen with certain kinds of builders.
The only way you get the 4 units. This may be I'm on the downside of this vote, so that's fair enough. But it means that the only way you get 4 units is if one of them is regulated affordable housing,
Yes.
which we've heard from testimony is going to be only done by mission-oriented developers. Right.
Yeah, I mean, right or wrong, wherever my head was, I think you're going to. It just seems like since most of our housing stock is already built, we're trying to disincent the demolition. To me, the 4th unit is been mostly about trying to preserve existing housing stock and trying to get it to happen there, and thus the conundrum that kind of that Morgan brought up. So
with this rule, how do you get to 4,000 square feet?
So can I change my vote?
Sure.
Straw. I want to change. I want to change it because I want it just by right. Just.
Oh yeah, you want to change it.
Okay, so that's 4.
That's
okay. 4.
Well, that doesn't.
Okay, we're down to 3.
3. Okay.
Can we discuss this just a little bit? Because
we've been discussing it. All
I know, but I mean, it just seems like we're operating all on different different facts. We almost feel like we're all kind of interpreting this all slightly differently, and maybe I'm interpreting it wrong. So I kind of want to go through it just really quickly because I know we're getting tired. I was seeing this the 4th unit as something that would only be built if we got some public benefit for it. And so if we give it to everyone for just straight off, what is the public benefit? And somebody could answer that if you want. Chris wants to answer me.
Go ahead, Chris, please.
So I think the public benefit is the extra unit. Right. I mean, we are trying to get
just the extra unit.
Places for people to live in the high opportunity neighborhoods. So to me, it's a trade-off between we get some number of 4-unit buildings built by market rate developers, or we get a smaller number of 4-unit buildings built by affordable housing developers.
Okay.
Right. And I'll take the more units. That's
okay. I understand. Okay, now I understand where you're coming from. So I wanted to ask one more question, if it's all right, with the chair. Eli, you're convinced that the 4th unit will not ever be built. if it's just if it's that. Now, why is it that all these nonprofits have told us that they want this?
I think what the nonprofits are saying is that the odds of them being able to purchase a lot are higher if they can build 4 units on it, and anyone else can build 3 units on it.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
that
they,
gives them a competitive advantage for lots. But it also means that no one else can build more than 3. So that's where we get to Chris's point, is that if everyone else is capped at 3, then you get fewer homes in the high opportunity areas. The nonprofit would have a bigger advantage because they could do 4, no one else could.
And I guess for me, I see that as a good thing, that they would have that advantage.
Yes. So, I mean, I agree. I want the nonprofits to get a competitive advantage. The other way, which is the other alternate to this, is to give them FAR bonus, which is a competitive advantage, but it's not as significant. It doesn't give them as big of a boost as an additional unit. And I guess I wanted to the question we haven't really got down to in existing housing. There is an option that's not on here yet, which would be do something like just waive your SDCs for any internal conversion. I mean, there are other things that we could do we can't, you're right, exactly, good point. There are ways the city could, beyond Title 33, give a boost to internal conversions. So just to float that out there, because I think that we should have, in terms of preserving existing housing, allowing ADUs already is an incentive to help preserve them. And the FAR bonus internal conversion helps it. But there might be some other things beyond 33 that could be on the table to preserve homes.
And then we were talking, and then Andres kept bringing up the idea of fee in lieu. And then anyone could build one if they paid the fee in lieu. What did you think of that?
Well, can we just maybe table that one for the fee in lieu discussion, just so we can get through this, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I understand.
So the next straw poll then is to allow 4 units by right. If the 4th one is affordable, you get an FAR bonus.
Mm-hmm.
So since the first one went down, if you're in support of that, you got me there.
Say it
So
again.
you're allowed 4 units by right. You can get extra FAR with the bonus if the 4th unit is affordable. So you can build a bigger structure if one's affordable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that went.
Okay, thank you. So now, question 5, fee in lieu, and we're
Hold it
almost.
just a second. Sorry, Jeff.
What we just voted on is consistent with the chart.
Correct, Jeff.
Yeah, we're looking at the slide there. You voted for a size bonus.
But we hadn't
Yeah, no, I mean, I just wanted to.
Yeah, you
discussed how to get the bonus.
You stayed with the table.
If I could chime in really quick, I think that what Chris was bringing up at the end is part of the tension that Andre attempted to address in the boundary adjustment of only having the A overlay in high opportunity areas, because I think in high opportunity areas, having 4 units by right gets more housing in high opportunity areas. In East Portland, having 4 by right gets you potentially more demolitions on smaller, older homes that can now be a 4-plex. And so I think that's a problem, and that's it.
For transparency, I've actually voted both ways. I've been persuaded by Eli that there may be other incentives to incentivize existing units, so I'm in favor of the 4 by right.
I'm going to just counter what you said, Andreas. Yes, you got 4, but you remember you're limited to, let's say, 5,000 square feet because they'd have to have a basement. So you've now got 4 average size, smaller than average size homes. So don't forget that as a perspective.
Okay. Ready?
Yep.
Question 5. This is about the fee in lieu. So the PSC was interested in finding a way to allow larger homes in some situations. We've talked about that a good deal tonight. The current proposal, when we left it at the last work session, did not include a pay in lieu option. Having a fee in lieu precludes the ability to consider adjustment requests, which gets kind of technical, and I'll let Morgan explain that, which influenced us to not support creation of a fee in lieu option, just stick with the table. So if I can just take a crack at explaining this. We really wanted to focus and it really goes back to your all's decision about the 2,500 to 4,000 range. If you really think it's important to be able to go to 3,000 for that single family house, a fee in lieu is a means to do it. Once you've created a fee in lieu, if you have a house that's a certain size, 2,500 square feet, and you want to bump it out for the extra bathroom or whatever it is, and not that this is going to be a frequent occurrence, when there's a fee in lieu, the only way to get it's the fee in lieu. Otherwise, you could go through an adjustment process, and that kind of flexibility for an existing housing stock is built in. So that's one reason. The second reason is we could create a fee in lieu. And having worked a good deal on the inclusionary housing proposal and setting the price for that, indeed, we could set a price for this fee in lieu. And I suspect that it's hard to say how much it will actually generate. You're either going to set a price that's going to be used, or you're going to set a price that's going to raise more for affordable housing when it's used, but not be used very often. It sort of goes either way, and so it's a lot of work for, I think, a marginal gain for dollars for affordable housing. That's really the other part of behind our recommendation against it. Like, I'm not confident it's the best bang for the buck. If you have settled in a size range that you're comfortable with, this could be an unnecessary sort of filigree on top of that. Technically, it could be done. So if a little bit of money for affordable housing is worth it, fine, but then we close down this adjustment path. So we thought it's one of those things where it's not so clear, it's overly complicating. We would recommend that we don't do it.
I'll just kind of layer on top of that personally, so there's two things. When we did it for inclusionary housing, it was a way in some ways to incent actually including affordable housing within multifamily structures, to kind of discourage not including them. To me, this is a different thing. We're kind of almost I'm not sure where it's going. And absolutely, it's just getting bigger homes. So I'm not sure really what it's getting us for a very small uptick, I think. And seeing where we've ended up with the fee in lieu, and then granted, it's just where we're ending up today. And I've just literally, I can't tell you how many emails are in my inbox about calculating fee in lieu, and I'm not going there, which is good. It's incenting, right, what we're kind of looking to have it incent. But at the same time, I just don't see it working like that in the single-family home market. So I'm not supportive of the fee in lieu option. Chris?
So let me play devil's advocate. I think the concern would be, and Jeff has raised this, that there will be a certain portion of the population that says, I just don't want to be restricted to 2,500 square feet. And having fee in lieu to get another 0.1 FAR is a safety valve to let off that steam and potentially make this a little bit politically more palatable.
And I guess I would counter that. Don't forget, you're not limited to 2,500 square feet. You're limited to more like 2,500 in the size of your basement. So again, let's just pick 1,000 for numbers, 3,500 square feet plus. Mm-hmm. You could do your fee in lieu on site by building an ANU, ADU. Mm-hmm. So I see it as that's where your fee in lieu is really going. It's actually getting it built at the time of a new home is built, this additional unit for someday in the future. Andre?
I look at the fee in lieu of, and I'm not supportive because as I look at it today, what we've said is if you want to go to 3,000 square feet, you can do that by adding a kitchen. There's no requirement, as you've stated, Chair, how big that kitchen is, or even if you put in the appliances, I guess. You can put the plugs in.
It has to be a kitchen, but
yeah,
the whole time.
But you could do a minimalist, and so the cost of the fee in lieu starts to equal what are the cost of a kitchen. And if it's higher, I'm going to pick the kitchen every time to get my bonus at the end. And if you're talking about a house bigger than 4,000, then I'm probably not supportive of that anyway. So if you're just saying, I don't want to do the kitchen and I'm going to fee in lieu the fourth, then I'm just not there. I think that becomes the cost of what the fee in lieu ends up being.
Go ahead, Eli.
Well, I came in with the idea of this Robin Hood tax fee in lieu out of concern that the number was too low. I'm feeling more comfortable that the 2,500 is okay with me, and if someone wants to put in a pressure relief valve, it could be council, but I'm okay not having the fee in lieu in our proposal. And yeah, and it sticks to a smaller house size.
I guess my only other thing that I would add, just to, don't forget, there's R10 and R20 lots out there for people who want much larger homes. So there are options to still have larger homes in the city. Okay, any other comments, questions? Let's take a straw poll. Which would be, do you support a fee in lieu option? So raise your hand if you support a fee in lieu option. That does not pass.
Great. Okay, the last question on this section, I'll turn it over to Morgan, and then after that, we just have item number 7, and we're almost out. Thank you.
So this one's really quick. It was one of the amendments that was introduced, I think it was at our first work session. It was eliminating or reducing the lot size requirement for 3 or more units in R7 from 6,300 to 5,000 square feet. We took 3 separate votes on 3 different options, and we got 3 votes, 4 votes, and 3 votes. So we were kind of left with, was this really where the commission wanted to go? So it's just a confirmation. Essentially, how this works today is if you have if you're doing a duplex on a corner lot, those lot sizes are a little bit larger. We just took that that concept and applied it to where we're doing 3 or more units in these different zones.
Okay.
I can keep talking, but I think it's pretty straightforward.
We're just confirming this.
Yeah, it's a straight confirmation.
Okay. Are there any questions on this? Nope. Okay. So, if you support the I'm getting tired. I can't even think of how to frame these questions. If raise your hand if you support the confirmation that's listed in the table, or if you just support what's in the table. Oh, you have a question?
No, I'm gonna flip what I originally said. I'm just gonna go for it.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, on to item number 7. This is about a conversion of existing homes. Do you want to do it?
Okay, so this was previously described as incentives for historic preservation, and we had received direction from the commission. There was interest in a broader application. So essentially internal conversions of older homes. We had to come up with a number. We picked 10 years. So what were some of the incentives for retention of existing homes? We had 2 in the proposal already. One is a small increment of a square foot addition every 5 years on an existing house without having to demonstrate compliance with the FAR. This is a little bit of our implementation solution for people that were doing small additions or wanted to have a small detached accessory structure. They could do that without having to count all the square footage on their house. The third item, item C there, is the basement conversion that allows the ADU to be larger than 800 square feet or 75% of the home size, depending on how large that existing basement is. So the really new thing here on the table is it's going back to our conversation around bonuses. So allowing for some additional FAR to convert existing houses into multiple units. They can provide that in the existing structure, or they can add detached accessory structure or structures. There would be limits to the alteration of the street facade at 25%. We have a third proposal here that was part of our discussion, but I think we're sort of stuck with a 4-unit maximum cap. So I don't think that that's actually a viable part of the proposal. So really what we're trying to do is create some additional incentive for adding multiple units or doing conversion of multiple units. They're already exempt from visitability if the structure is existing. They would get some additional FAR, but there would be some limitation on how much the street-facing facade they could alter. But what happens behind the street-facing facade is sort of fair game in this proposal.
So if I'm going to reinterpret this, and it's this table that we've already kind of looked at, right? And that bonus for internal conversions instead of affordability could be additional FAR.
Yes.
Could you do both? Could you get to 4,500 by doing both?
So I guess we should clarify that.
Okay,
It's an
well, let's
additive of-
maybe start with the first, and then we can talk about if we want to add that option.
Sorry, what?
I don't know. You guys, you tell us. That's okay.
We were brainstorming here at an inappropriate moment.
Somebody got excited. Okay.
Why 10 years? Why does the house have to be
Why pick a number?
Yeah.
There is some concern when we talk about what is an existing house of somebody building essentially well, I guess if we're adding extra FAR, it wouldn't matter. So there's some concern about building a structure pre-primed to be converted and utilizing the bonus to get there, coming in the next day for a permit.
So one way this might get used would be if you have an existing house, you make the existing house into a duplex, and in the backyard you build a top-down duplex, subject to the floor coverage limits for the site, like 750 a floor. I'm trying to think the maximum impact this would have. It seems like one use of this would be just doing an addition on an existing house or converting an existing house. I think pretty clearly that's
pretty normal.
Bingo, right? And in terms of, and I actually think the first option I said also is okay with me. It's you're basically preserving the existing house, you do duplex, and you're creating a new structure on the property that is still constrained by height of detached accessory structures and site coverage of detached accessory structures. So at least in my mind, that's the way you would totally max out this provision, which doesn't seem too scary to me. So I guess I'm generally okay with it. But am I interpreting that right?
I think that's right. Coming back to Jeff's point, just thinking through that a little bit more. So it is conceivable someone builds a house with a 2,250 square foot floor plate, 2,000 square foot basement, right? And then comes back the day after the final permit and converts that basement into an ADU and doesn't pay SDCs on what is essentially a duplex. So it's really the notion here is about providing incentives for existing house retention, not demolishing something and building something in preparation to be converted into multiple units and utilizing this incentive. But that's the reason for the distinction.
Go ahead, Andre.
So the affordability on the existing, so how would that not work?
So I think this is a question we should ask the commission, whether if we're talking about a 0.1 FAR bonus for affordability, right? That's where we landed. Whether that should be additive on top of the 0.1 FAR for an existing house conversion if one of the units is affordable in that conversion. And
we'll call that to question. I think the it's either do you get an additional bonus 0.1 FAR for an affordable unit, or plan B is if you have an existing home just converting into 4. So that's one path, and then the other path would be if you have an existing home and you convert it into 4 and you got your 0.1 FAR, you get yet another 0.1 FAR if one of those is affordable.
So let me ask, are affordable housing nonprofits likely to pursue internal conversions as a way of achieving their mission?
I guess is not.
Then there's no point in stacking the incentives.
I personally agree, but
I guess if you're using the logic, if they're going to pursue nonprofits, we wouldn't be doing the affordable bonus previously. So I think
they're going to do
for
new
the same
builds.
criteria. So I'm a little. The existing home, in my view, should not be exempt from the affordable housing if we've already done affordable housing bonus on a new structure. So, and I know it's difficult, probably won't be used, it may limit, but again, we have this argument that we've built our box of we're going to do this affordable housing for a very limited group. It's, again, a very limited group, again, that we're going to do affordable housing for.
So my thought on this is that taking an existing structure and allowing it to be divided, once you get to that third unit, you've gotten a lot of complexity in the building code. Having that fourth unit actually might make it happen. I don't think you're really going to get 3 in an internal conversion. So you're spending a lot of money. And so having the FAR help offset the saving of that structure versus demolition is really like that public benefit. So to me, this is an A or a B path. I think most likely the nonprofits are going to come in on the new build path anyway, as we've just stated. So this is just providing a path to disincent demolition and encourage multiple units. Any Andreas?
For C, I'd like to bring up the idea of having all internal conversions be able to exceed it, not just basement ADUs.
Can I get a point of clarification? Then the purpose for that would be what?
Situations where they might have an attic ADU, or the ADU internally might not be the basement. So it seems like if you're trying to make it flexible for them, it shouldn't be restricted to only the basement.
So is there something specific about the ADU that you're after?
More than 800 feet, right? So we're saying basement ADUs can exceed the cap.
But in terms of, so if we called it a triplex versus a house with an attic and a basement ADU, what is the difference for you?
I guess I was under the impression that there'd be SDC and building code requirements that would be different.
Okay. So just on the SDC point, I think that's something we want to circle back to. I think it's an interesting topic, and I think the commission should be making a recommendation around that, although it's something outside of our purview. On the building code, obviously, that is entirely out of our hands. And what we've heard from BDS is that whether we call them ADUs or not is not going to affect how the building code treats the structure. So we'll confirm that. But I just wanted to see what you're getting to. So thanks.
Any other questions on this?
Yeah, can you just briefly explain 7A3?
7A3.
About design or historic resource review. Suppose your house isn't in.
Yeah, on reflection, I think that should just be dropped. We had initially thought about ways of bonusing and providing additional incentives beyond just an FAR incentive, and we were at 4. We wanted to take that up a notch to go to 5. There are problems with going to 5, I think, in terms of how that affects potential tax assessment with our zone and our proposal. So I don't think that is a viable option going above 4. So I guess I would suggest removing that from the proposal.
Okay, so why don't we start with, well, I guess we already called, well, we didn't take a straw poll. I was going to say calling to question the bonus on top of the bonus thing, but I am sorry. Okay. For those who are supportive of allowing 0.1 FAR as a bonus for existing structures, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And then let's just, since we've got that covered, are you in support of A with items 1 and 2 removing staff's number 3 item? Raise your hand.
I didn't understand.
So we've basically voted to allow kind of bonus FAR 0.1 for existing structures. Are you also okay with the language that says addition or new detached structure, and then limiting alterations to the street facade to 25% and striking number 3?
So to clarify, the only way to get the bonus FAR is if you limit the street facade change.
Right.
And okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Great.
So other recommendations?
Okay.
I apologize. I know
So
it's
we
late.
are at 8, and I'm not sure we're going to have a quorum, but
Ask a quick question. I'm really sorry. 7B.
Oops.
You're allowed an additional. You get a 250 square foot addition to your house if your existing house, regardless of your FAR. I'm not sure that's big enough, but I have a second question. So if I have a 3,000 square foot house, existing house in an R5, I can't do an ADU. Or my ADU, I could do a 300 square foot ADU.
You could do an internal ADU.
You could do an ADU in your basement or internal.
Right, but I couldn't do an external.
What is this?
You'd be
What's the
size
scenario?
limited.
Yeah.
If you want.
So
In that particular situation, Jeff, you'd be limited. I mean, you would have expended all of your FAR. The 250 square foot, unless you're talking about very, very small ADU, would probably not be
I'm
sufficient.
just wondering how many people have relatively larger houses. Let's say an average size house, 2,800 square foot house, who are thinking about doing an ADU in their backyard, which is now increasingly popular. This will preclude ADU opportunities.
Well, actually, 2,800. By doing the ADU, you're up to 3,000 already, right? Because
what
the ADU already earned you.
What do you allow? What's your FAR for two
For
units?
two would be 3,000.
Because you're up to 3,000 just by adding the ADU itself, and then this gives you some FAR on top of that. So if you have 2,800 square foot house,
Right.
and you want to build an ADU,
You get 250 by right.
well, you get 500 just by doing the ADU.
You would be 2 units then.
Yeah, wait. What? I'm sorry. 2 units is what's the FAR?
You've already earned your way up to the next row on the table
So you're
by doing.
0.6.
You're 0.6 at that point, and then this would be on top of that,
0.6 is 3,000 square feet.
right?
My house is 2,800 square feet.
So right,
That leaves me 200 square feet for my ADU.
and then you can use this bonus also. It gets you
bonus.
well, the one we just talked about.
Well, it's not really a bonus. It's a bit of it's trying to facilitate implementation of the FAR. So you can either
Oh, so what is it?
if you came in with an addition that was more than 250 square feet, you would have to show us your FAR. And if you're showing us our FAR and you're going to be above that 3,000 square foot cap, then
You can't
you'd
do
be
it.
out of luck.
So my-
So I guess
this
the
goes back
answer
a little
maybe
bit.
is that by not doing the fee in lieu, you're going to apply for an adjustment in that situation.
That's right.
Have we created an adjustment process yet, or
It's
we've
already
talked
there.
about it?
Yeah, it already
Oh,
says.
Already
so we had to make a
Already.
choice: fee in lieu or adjustment,
Right.
and we chose not fee in lieu. So that means
I
the
didn't know we
adjustment.
chose adjustment. We haven't seen the language for the adjustment, though, have we?
It's
Well,
it's an
the
existing
way it
process.
works now.
Let's see. Just
The code already allows you to submit adjustments for all sorts of things, and
I'm wondering whether we need some language in the adjustment that's more tied to the specific situations we're creating with this.
I don't think
believe
so. The whole nature of the adjustment is to look at the regulation, the purpose of the regulation, and how you're mitigating for any impact that you're creating. So it looks at your context and how the scale relates to your adjacent. The purpose of the regulation is not overwhelming your adjacent property, adjacent houses. So as long as your proposal is meeting that general purpose and you've mitigated for any potential impacts of that scale,
And is it implied that an 800 square foot detached ADU doesn't overwhelm? Or is that gonna
it's
be-
site specific. It's a case by case basis. That's the whole benefit actually of the discretionary review is you can look at each site specifically, like rather than create a standard for that.
Go ahead, Andre.
You haven't sold me on, but I'll come back to you on it.
Fair enough.
Just, I thought we were going to vote on affordability, but in our first vote on the 0.1 FAR, we precluded the vote on affordability.
The,
Oh,
the
fair enough. What we did not vote for was
Stack the bonuses.
whether you want to stack the bonuses. Correct.
Okay.
And we can certainly do that.
Okay. I was just wondering if we did, then I want to take back my vote and vote no on the previous one because I would. If we're going to vote on affordability, I'm okay going forward.
So
If
that-
we're not, I mean, it's easy thing for me.
So that wasn't in that case. You were, if I what I understand is what you're proposing is not stacking them, but just you don't have the option to use additional FAR. That you just have to.
No, I'm. Yeah, exactly.
It would be required
It'd be a requirement
to have. So there's no difference for insurance.
consistent with the other one. So yeah. So
Did we vote on that? Why am I feeling like we did?
well, we voted on 0.1 FAR, and I'm just wondering, did it preclude the affordability? If it does, then I'm not in favor of that. And I'm okay with that.
Whichever one you want, Andre, I'll vote for.
No, I'm not in favor of one, and let's move on to other recommendations, and we're good.
Yeah.
Well,
We can.
yeah. onward? Okay.
Well, I think we
So
could,
hold
or
it,
we
hold
could
it.
do that next time.
Yeah. I mean,
think-
are you talking about on the affordability thing on this particular one, or moving on
No,
to
the
other
other
recommendations? Yeah, I'm
recommendations.
gonna suggest that.
Right.
Cut us off.
That
We will have time. This has been a good effort tonight, so
Yeah.
we can stop.
Okay, I do just want to make sure that you've raised a concern. Is there anybody else who wants to further have the conversation about the affordability and how we handled this particular number 7 and existing conversions?
But when we come back to this, we're going to straw poll B and C. Like those were.
No, I would say let's just get it done tonight. I
Okay,
thought
good.
they were adopted as a part of it, but if we weren't clear on what we were voting on, we should probably make sure we're clear.
Okay, so. Okay.
So I think when I clarified A, there was confusion about we were just voting on A. I meant to say it's the whole proposal.
I gosh, I heard just a section. So.
Gotcha.
Okay. So
Let's
what-
be clear about it.
the entire proposal that's in front of us, striking A3.
Okay.
We did. There was confusion about the vote, so we're just redoing the straw poll.
And it does not include Q7.
Does not include what?
Q7.
7.
Correct. Just I'm sorry. What's on our screen, which
Okay.
is you're right, does
Yep.
not include Q7.
I don't know what that is.
So, we don't have Katie here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
What was the vote last?
8.
So Katie, it's okay.
Indisposed.
I understand. So, just this in the screen in front of you, we had some confusion on what the initial vote was, so we redid the straw poll. Do you support the proposal that's in front of you, 7A, B, and C, but not including A3?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so that's 6.
Great.
Fabulous. Thank you. Appreciate everyone's efforts tonight. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Can I ask 2 things for follow-up for next week? Should I do that
We are
after?
not adjourned. We're going to have 2 more questions.
I was just curious about the proposal that came up a while ago about subdivisions and subdividing lots, and if that was going to come back.
That's next work
Great.
session.
And then I'd appreciate more information about the adjustment process and the cost of adjustment, because it seems like we created a fee in lieu, but instead of the fee going to affordable housing, it goes to the adjustment process.
Okay.
And so I'd be curious learning a little bit more about that.
Well, I will counter. I think what we were saying is that the fee's actually going to the creation of the ADU at the time. So that'd be one way to look at it. Anyway, now we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.